All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee. Bill hearings Friday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, but also happy birthday to our first bill sponsor. We'll call up House Bill 527, Delegate Charkoudian, Maryland Transit Administration, Purple Line, Free Ridership and Advertising. And if you have a panel, please bring them up.
Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, for the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian, here asking for a favorable report on House Bill 527. So let me start by saying that I am a big supporter of and have been for years of the Purple Line. I believe that the Purple Line, and I hope eventually the Red Line, and all kinds of mass transit rail, in particular light rail, gets built across our state. We need more, and it's really important for access to economic opportunity. It's important for economic development, and it's important for the region's well-being. Having said that, I also think that we need to make sure that any major transportation project that's taken by this state that has benefits to the entire state, that has benefits to the entire region, does a better job at considering the impact on those individuals who are the closest to it. So when the Purple Line first started being built, I think everyone who lived along it, there were mixed feelings about whether they wanted it or not, but even those who thought it was a good idea believed that it, we're ready for there to be some sacrifice. We're ready to lose trees, which was unfortunate. We're ready to have traffic jams. We're ready to have, some discomfort and some inconvenience. Because this project was very poorly managed, the way that the private-public partnership was set up and a lot of the management, what would have been a couple of years of inconvenience has now become 12 years of delay and significant years of inconvenience. And in particular, the people who live along it have been harmed in ways that I think were not originally envisioned. And you're going to hear some of that. But I'll just say there's businesses that have actually shut down because of Purple Line construction that has kept people from getting access to their businesses. There's one section, and this is, I know it very well for my district. I know it's true for the districts around me. I know a lot of the Prince George's County folks. I see you nodding your heads around this table. And so there's businesses that have actually closed. There's businesses that haven't had residents able to get to them for months at a time, literally having to walk across lawns, climb over Jersey barriers to be able to access them. Time and again, we've asked the Purple Line, the contractors and MTA to do things to mitigate it. More recently, they've put together a grant that hopefully will help the businesses survive, but there's still significant damage and the grants only are a drop in the bucket. At the same time, residents have lost pedestrian access. They have had extensive periods of time where they have put their lives in danger walking down the street. For some reason, our contracts don't build into them the fact that contractors have to ensure safe pedestrian access and ADA compliance. So I personally have taken it upon myself to build my running routes every morning along Purple Line construction in my district, and I run and I take pictures of all of the violations of ADA and all of the times that I find myself on a sidewalk and then suddenly running into a construction zone. So while it makes for an interesting run, it is not acceptable that to keep a community safe during a construction that lasts as long as this has, that a delegate has to run along and take photos. And also stopping to take photos kind of slows down. It ruins my PR numbers when I have to keep stopping and taking the photos. So there's that. So I could go on, others could tell their stories. This bill is an attempt to say we are going to recognize that while this project is beneficial to the state, to the region. There's some people who have paid a higher price, and we're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to give them a small token of restitution. It doesn't start to address the levels of sacrifice folks have made, but it's a token of recognition of that. So there's two ways it does that. The first is that for people who live within a quarter mile of the purple line, it gives them 3 months of free ridership. I think that this is, again, it's a token of recognition. I also think it's a way to start people getting in the habit of riding the new transit, and so it's promotional at the same time. The second thing it does is it gives the businesses who are within a quarter mile of the purple line free advertising for, it actually doesn't have a period, but I'll put a time frame around it in an amendment. The idea being that they barely survived, and now they theoretically will benefit from a purple line if they can make it through to it, and make it through to when it's operational. And so, so the hope is that they then would benefit from the fact that folks are coming by their businesses and know to stop and engage and drink some delicious coffee, which we're going to hear about in a second. So. So that's sort of the concept of it. I've been in conversations with MDOT, MTA in particular, and they have some proposals, I think, of what they could live with. So I'll stay in conversation with them and expect to have some amendments to the committee. But that's where we are starting from, and we have residents and businesses who have been affected who are here to share their testimony. May I pass it along, Mr. Chair? Please, Lenny.
What do I do?
Yeah, nothing, don't touch anything. Oh, there you go, you're fine.
I just wanted to say thank you. My name is Lenny Zagai, and I'm co-owner of Kafa Cafe, which we started in 1996. So the main thing about us is we are committed to the community to create a space for every community that comes there and feel comfortable and feel at home. So we are right at 963 Bonifant Street, right on the Purple Line corridor. And I really strongly believe that this bill will provide a very good things for, especially for legacy businesses that who created downtown Silver Spring, what you see right now, and for the new ones that comes in. And it will provide access to all the people that who lives in the area and businesses that who created Silver Spring what it is. I would have left a long time ago if we did not have a very strong feeling to create a community. So what else? So I encourage you, please pass Bill 527, and I wanted to say thank you.
Estimado presidente Cowan, vicepresidente Boyce y miembro de los comités del Medio Ambiente y Transporte, mi nombre es María Morán, estoy a favor del HB 527, he sido residente de Long Branch durante 15 años y durante los últimos 7 años he sido testigo de cómo la construcción de línea morada púrpura ha causado angustias en nuestra comunidad. Ha sido seriamente perjudicial para nuestra economía, pagando más por reparaciones de automóviles debido a las carreteras en mal estado o llegando tarde al trabajo debido a problemas para viajar en transporte público. La seguridad de los peatones están en alto riesgo. Todos los días también hay en efecto perjudicial en la salud de la comunidad, ya que las emisiones de las maquinarias de construcción han aumentado enfermedades comunes como el asma. El modesto gesto de gratitud propuesto por este proyecto de ley enviará un mensaje positivo de reconocimiento y consideración. Con suerte, el Estado actúa de esta solución pronto de manera justa. Por lo tanto, insto a se presente informe favorable sobre el HB 527. Gracias.
My name is Maria Moran. I'm in favor of the HB 527. I have been a Long Branch resident for 15 years, and for the last 7 years, I have witnessed how the Purple Line construction has been causing distress in our community. It's been seriously detrimental to our economy, paying more for car reparations due to rough roads are getting late to work due to problems riding public transportation. Pedestrian safety is at high risk every day. There is also a detrimental effect on community health since the emissions from construction machinery have exacerbated common diseases such as asthma. The modest gesture of gratitude proposed by this bill will send a positive message of acknowledgement and consideration. Hopefully, the current state of this repair will soon be fixed equitably. Hence, I urge a favorable report on HB 527. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And for the interpreter, are you Ms. Pinto?
I am.
Great, awesome. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or her panel? Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Delegate, you said you were receptive to listening to MDOT's, I guess, their letter of
Yes.
favorable with amendments. But they were talking about a reduction from 3 to 1 month. And
Yeah.
then, and also in their testimony is where they've been providing small business grant programs to support impacted business, $50,000. Are any of these ladies, have any of those been awarded any of their small business money?
Did you get the small business grant?
Which one is that one? We did get
purple line.
the purple line, not yet, so, no.
Yeah, there was a smaller grant that was a couple years ago.
Which was about like $5,000 was between the whole corridor from Chevy Chase all the way to Prince George's. So it was by lottery, and we got a chance to get that one, and we got $5,000.
So I think.
It says that MDOT recently launched its small business grant program, so I'm not sure what recently means.
It's like last week. They did, yeah, it's very, very recent,
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, but, you know, it's, the project's $4 billion over budget, I think, and 72% complete, so, you know, I think we're all kind of concerned with where the spending's going.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I have lots of concerns about the way, I mean, as supportive as I am of having the project complete, I have lots of concerns about the way it was managed initially under the previous administration and the need to get it, you know, kind of back on track and done.
Thank you.
And just a little history, about 7 years ago, we legislated those grants. So those grants came from the General Assembly. In the latest renegotiation and delay, the P3 partner agreed to continue those even though the legislative authorization has ended. I should note we've been joined by some of our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee because this is a dual-referred bill. Delegate Charkoudian, if you had a road being built in your district that was causing this kind of disruption, would you put a bill like this in also?
I would.
So this is not about transit versus roads. This is about making sure your businesses and residents are not being inconvenienced by the state.
Yeah, and I think when we put this kind of a thing in, I think it's a reminder to, like, I hope that the department has learned a lot about just on the very narrow issue of pedestrian safety and writing. Like, I was shocked to find out that that wasn't written into the contract. Aspects related to business impact is not written into the contract. So I've had these conversations where I'm like, well, if you wouldn't have a construction zone where they forgot to have a lane for cars to go through, but somehow we have construction zones where they can forget to have a place where pedestrians can walk or forget to have access to a business's entrance. And I hope that the lesson around this and our message around this is not just to make sure that this particular large transit project gets done differently in the future, but that all public transportation and roads and everything else that we do gets done in a way that's considering the impact on the community.
Question from Delegate Stewart.
Chair, thank you, Delegate, for this bill. Thank you all for coming. I think this is a really good idea. I just have one question, which is about the advertising. Is it limited to small businesses? And by the way, I've been to Kefa Cafe many times. I really enjoy your coffee. But is it limited to small businesses like Kefa, or can any businesses apply for the advertising?
You mean in the bill? Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and I think it's actually is vague in the bill. I think it does make sense for it to be limited to sort of the ones who would have struggled more to survive. I will say that part is likely to get amended based on some of the feedback from MDOT. So if it doesn't and it stays sort of in the advertising the way it's written, then I'll make sure we tighten that up.
Got it. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I know that, you know, I used to live in downtown Silver Spring in particular. I know that there's McDonald's and all sorts of big companies. I would hate if the demand for this outstripped the supply of available advertising space for large companies to benefit with free advertising at the expense of the mom and pops who actually struggled during this construction. Isn't that so?
100%.
Thank you.
Great. I do not, Delegate Healy, you have a question?
Thank you. I didn't even push the button yet. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the bill. My district has quite a few of the stops along the Purple Line between New Carroll to the University of Maryland campus. So we see this all the time. I agree with you completely. But the other issue on the Prince George's side is we're always hoping that when it's finally finished, it's going to be an opportunity for new businesses to come in where there haven't been any, that it is going to increase economic activity. And so not just the people who've been putting up with it all this time, which really they do deserve a lot, but I'm not sure we can afford to give them what they really deserve because it has been a real burden in the community. And all the things that have gone wrong, I hope everybody's learned from and they don't forget these lessons. But I want to thank you for this. My question is about your work with the department. Are you contemplating doing amendments yourself, or are they going to do amendments, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so we've been talking, and just this morning they sent me some suggested language, so I'm kind of reviewing that, and I'll submit the amendments to the committee in conjunction with, based on my work with them.
Okay, I do not see any additional questions. We do have some, thank you all. We do have some virtual witnesses. Sheila Somasker from the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, if you're with us.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today. My name is Sheila Somashaker, and I'm here on behalf of the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, or PLCC, a collaborative of nonprofits, businesses, and stakeholders working to achieve equitable development along the Purple Line transit route. With its home at the University of Maryland's National Center for Smart Growth, PLCC has developed research-supported plans and policy priorities that address housing affordability and small business retention in communities along the corridor. Our goal is to ensure that the benefits of the Purple Line are equitably shared. With less than 3 years until a completed Purple Line, communities are looking forward to experiencing the benefits of this multi-billion-dollar state investment. However, neighborhoods and small businesses need support to adapt to change and recover from a prolonged construction phase. Construction disruption has caused quantifiable harm, with some businesses closing and others reporting up to a 75% loss in revenue during the most intensive periods of construction. These disruptions compound what researchers call Purple Line anticipation effects that have already resulted in disproportionate property value increases along the line. Research suggests that gentrification-driven pressures have resulted in higher rates of business closure along the Purple Line than in other areas. Further, national research suggests that these pressures are likely to continue or even accelerate once the light rail is open. It will take intentional work and investment from the state to ensure equitable benefits of the Purple Line. HB 527 is a step in the right direction, offering a period of free fares and free advertising space. We urge you to pass this bill. We also encourage you to consider extending the benefits, especially free ad space, for a longer period of time. Perhaps there are ways to balance pay and free ad space over time, given the number of local businesses that are good candidates to take advantage of this benefit. Finally, we are encouraged to see legislation that supports equitable benefits of an operational Purple Line, and we would welcome the opportunity to partner with you to explore other such solutions in the future. Thank you for bringing this bill forward, and we encourage you to support it.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Navlet Ashmead from the Jamaican Country Kitchen.
Yes, I'm here. Okay. I am in partnership with this. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes. I'm with the Purple Line because I'm the owner of Jamaican Country Kitchen. I am in the Glenridge Shopping Center, and I am affected really high business because we used to have 2 entrances to enter into my business, and now we only have 1. And I am right in that intersection of 410 and 450. When I do get customer in, their complaint is like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how much I can do this because coming here is terrible. You sometimes customers only get 30 minutes for lunch, and by the time they take that 30 minutes of traffic to get to me, they just divert to someplace, and I lost business. I usually do like 100, like today's Friday, I may do like 180, 150 tickets. Sometimes it depends, goes up. Now I barely do 80 tickets. So it affects me a great lot. So right now I used to have like 4 employees. Right now it's only 3 of us here. Like I myself have to be an employee, and the one that cash in and the one that help me cook. I can't have no one else. I even sometimes have to do dishes because I can't pay employees to stay here. So the Purple Line, I affected great deal of this traffic. So there is no way for the customer to walk. The cars driving, there is nothing for them. So they went, by the time they get to me, they are so tired and they lost their lunch break. So it doesn't make no sense for them to come and do business with me. So I'm losing a lot. I have my sales dropped sometimes less than 50%.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 527. Delegate Charkoudian, happy birthday once again. We're going to jump to House Bill 134, Delegate Taveras, motor vehicles, school buses, seatbelts. And Delegate Taveras, I know you have some virtual witnesses, but if you have anybody in person that you need to bring up, please do so. And I should note we're joined by at least one colleague from Ways and Means because this is another dual-referred bill.
And for the record, we have a positive position on Laura Charkoudian's bill as well through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Prince George's. She may not know that yet. Sorry. Thank you, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce and esteemed committee members. I am here to ask for your favorable report on HB 134, seatbelts on school buses. Last year, this committee supported this bill, and I thank you for that. This year, we made a minor adjustment, delaying implementation until after 2029, and included an amendment to protect school bus drivers while keeping the core of the bill intact. School buses transport thousands of Maryland children daily, yet they lack a basic safety feature that has been standard in personal vehicles for decades: seatbelts. All right? Channeling Ralph Nader. The National Transportation Safety Board has repeatedly found that compartmentalization alone is insufficient, and I reiterate that, particularly in side impact crashes and rollovers. The NTSB is an independent federal agency established by Congress to investigate all civilian aviation and accident vehicle crashes in the United States, as well as incidents in other modes of transportation, including railroads, transit, highways, marine, pipelines, and commercial space. Its main responsibilities include determining the probable cause of these incidents and issuing safety recommendations to prevent future occurrences. Additionally, NTSB conducts transportation safety research and provides support for accident victims and their families. The agency has investigated multiple fatal school bus crashes that highlight the need for seatbelts, and I'll go over a few. In 2020, an NTSB investigation into a school bus crash in Decatur, Tennessee, where a 7-year-old passenger was killed, found that students not properly seated were at a greater risk of injury. Lap shoulder belts would have reduced the severity of the crash. In 2016, they found that a Chattanooga crash killed 6 students determined that a lack of seat belts contributed to the severity of injuries. The impact threw students from their seats, proving that compartmentalization alone was ineffective. In 2012, a New Jersey crash investigated by NTSB found that students improperly wearing or not using lap belts suffered severe injuries. The agency concluded the lap shoulder belts would have significantly reduced harm. And lastly, in 2014, NTSB, an investigation in a crash in Anaheim, California, demonstrated that seatbelts reduced passenger injuries, particularly in the area of maximum impact. 9 states, including Florida, of all places, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Texas, already require seatbelts. This is a nonpartisan issue. The NTSB continues to recommend that states, including Maryland, mandate lap shoulder belts in all new school buses. This bill was inspired by an 11-year-old Montgomery County student concerned about her safety. Bluebird, a major school bus manufacturer, now provides seatbelts at no extra cost, removing cost as a barrier. Ensuring student safety must be our priority. I urge this committee to issue a favorable report on HB 134 and take this necessary step to protect Maryland's children. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Taveras. I have a quick question. I'm looking at the unfavorable testimony, and of course, it's mainly because of, they believe it's an unfunded mandate, and I guess the different schools would have to purchase new school buses with seatbelts. Is there some other way where seatbelts could be, I don't know how to say, like fitted for school buses? You mentioned a little bit of it. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
So Bluebird is, see, that's Bluebird right there. Okay. Bluebird, what they're trying to say is they're one of the major school manufacturers in the country. And what they're saying is that they now, given NTSB's where they've come out publicly, as of November 2023, they've changed their position on compartmentalization, and they provide now flexi buses and a change in position where they now provide seatbelts at no extra charge when they produce a new bus.
I know, but I guess what I'm asking, Delegate, is that, is there a way, is there some manufacturer that allows seatbelts to be fitted on current buses without? In other words, you wouldn't have to purchase a new bus, but there's some manufacturer that actually can put them on buses without.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm sure they could retrofit.
Yes,
if that's if the concern is that retrofitting buses, it is that is a possibility. But the way we originally structured the bill, sure, so that it could be phased in with the replacement of new buses that's right, expected over a 12-year period, so that it wouldn't be an added charge to, it would just be part of the
I hear you. With all due respect, I came from Montgomery County Schools, where I was a sergeant school bus, patrol. But elementary school, Bill Elementary. Chair and I went to Bill Elementary. But I guess if the point is about safety, and those who are unfavorable are saying that they cannot do this because they cannot afford it. I guess if this is about kids' safety, is there, again, another alternative that we can discuss potentially that would create some abilities to do retrofits? And if so, what is the cost? And is it amenable to individuals who are unfavorable? That's what I'm, because if this is about the kids, then we're waiting for new buses to be then purchased with seatbelts, but then kids still aren't without.
That's a great point.
Okay.
And we could try to find the retrofit cost.
If there's a such thing, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it'd be beneficial.
We could call like Bluebird and other manufacturers to find out what that is. I think it's in the tens of thousands, it's not in the hundreds, which
I think it'd be
is
helpful for the subcommittee. Thank you.
not a problem.
Delegate Silverde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assuming that we have seatbelts and they're applicable, who is going to oversee the fact that the seatbelts are being used? I mean, not the driver, obviously. He's too busy driving.
Yes, thank you.
Hopefully.
That's a great question. There are 2 points to that. One of them is that there will be training on behalf of the parents and on behalf of the driver to make sure, and obviously the children, to make sure that they understand that they have to put on their seatbelts. But recognizing that children are children,
Yes.
we recognize that liability should not lie necessarily on the bus driver. So that liability, criminal or civil, has been removed.
I didn't
And
hear
that there's an amendment to that.
I didn't hear the liability issue. Would you repeat that, please?
So there is a liability removal to the bus drivers should a child not comply and remove their seatbelts. So that we are addressing the concerns of industry with regards to a child being a child. But I would say that the use of seatbelts has proven to be a very, a great addition in improving or decreasing disciplinary measures that need to be taken on a bus. It's been highly favorable.
Oh, I agree with that, 100%. All right, thank you.
Delegate Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for bringing the bill. I supported the bill last year. Just a very brief question. To piggyback off Delegate Ciliberti, although school bus drivers are not liable, we're aware that the school system is completely not liable as well, too. And is that something that parents need to be made aware of?
Yes.
And is that already woven within? Thank you.
Yes. I mean, this is why it's so important to train parents as well. And I mean, that's the same way you would train your child once in a car, right? If they get on a car, they know that they need to sit and buckle down for a seatbelt in a car seat.
Great, thank you, Delegate Taveras. I don't see any further questions for you. I know you have some witnesses. We're going to start with our star student, Juliana Nunez, who I know many of us remember from her testimony last year, if she's with us.
Hello, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and committee members. My name is Juliana Nunez, and I am here to ask for your favorable report on HB 134 motor vehicles, school buses, seatbelts. I first testified in support of this bill last year when it passed this committee. After I testified, many circumstances have changed that reinforce the urgent need for seatbelts on school buses. I am now a middle school student who rides the school bus daily from my home in Bethesda to my campus in Washington, D.C. I experienced 2 separate incidents where I not only violently hit my head against the back of the seat, but also fell off my seat onto the floor. Also, there was a recent incident in Howard County that involved a school bus rollover. And in August 2024, a tragic incident in Texas claimed the life of a preschooler. These events are heartbreaking reminders that the safety of us kids cannot be compromised. These personal experiences make it clear to me that our current system is failing to protect the children during transit. I am not only testifying just for my own safety, I am speaking out for every school bus rider, present and future. We deserve to ride in buses that are equipped with the necessary safety features to protect us. We need to require schools to purchase school buses with seatbelts. In conclusion, I urge you to provide a favorable report on this bill. Thank you for your attention and commitment to the safety of every child in our schools.
Great job, Juliana. And I see you're a very proud dad in the back of the room, too. So we're all here watching. So good job. I'm not going to let anybody question you, though. So we're going to go to Kristen Poland with the National Transportation Safety Board.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Kristen Poland, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Highway Safety at the National Transportation Safety Board. I'm here to testify on House Bill 134 and why mandating passenger lap shoulder belts on large school buses in Maryland is the right thing to do. I'm a biomechanical engineer, a Maryland resident, and my 2 children rode school buses to and from their Maryland public schools for many years. First, I want to make it clear that school buses are the safest way for children to get to and from school and school-related activities. As I've explained in my written testimony, this is because of a number of safety requirements for school buses, including compartmentalization, which is a passive form of occupant protection. However, in almost 30 years at the NTSB, I've investigated numerous school bus crashes where compartmentalization was not enough to prevent injuries and deaths, especially in side impact crashes with other large vehicles, in rollovers, and when pre-crash bus maneuvering throws children from the protective seat compartment. Properly worn passenger lap shoulder belts would have lessened injuries and saved lives. We also know that children are at risk of ejection from the seating compartment and the bus itself in rollovers. Passenger lap shoulder belts provide the best protection, keeping students within the bus and reducing injurious impacts with other passengers and with hard structures. I have also investigated large school bus crashes where passenger lap shoulder belts reduce the severity of injuries, even in an area of intrusion. In summary, to best protect Maryland students who ride school buses, we recommend that Maryland amend its statute to require passenger lap shoulder belts for all passenger seating positions in new large school buses. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Poland. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Poland? Okay. Thank you so much. Seeing none, we will move to favorable with amendment witness, Lauren Gamer. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Public Health Law Clinic at the University of Maryland, Carey School of Law. Thank you. You may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman and members of the committee. I am Lauren. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Corman and members of the committee. I am Lauren Gammer, a student in the Public Health Law Clinic, testifying in favor of House Bill 134 with amendments. Every day this school year, more than 600,000 Maryland students will travel by school bus. Although school buses are generally considered among the safest vehicles on the road, they present risk of injury or death to Maryland students. In October 2023, 12 children were injured in a school bus crash in White Marsh. Between 2013 and 2022, 61 passengers were killed in school transportation vehicles nationally. Of these individuals, 35 were children. Given this data, it is evident that greater measures must be taken to protect school children. Compartmentalization is the primary method relied on to protect large school bus occupants in the event of a crash, but it is not enough. Between 2013 and 2022, 26 occupants of large school buses were killed due to bus rollover. Of all school bus occupants killed in this period, 72% were occupants of large school buses. According to the NTSB, a properly worn three-point seatbelt provides a higher level of protection than compartmentalization alone, particularly in rollover or side impact crashes with severe lateral impact. Three-point seatbelts enhance compartmentalization in all crash scenarios, permitting bus passengers to come to a stop with the vehicle rather than continuing to move and striking the interior parts of the bus. 7 states have already passed laws requiring three-point seatbelts on school buses. The NTSB finds it unacceptable that Maryland has not implemented these requirements. By enacting House Bill 134, the General Assembly has the opportunity to protect Maryland's most precious resource, its children. We are favorable with amendments because there appears to be a drafting error with respect to the location of the school bus driver immunity provision. Our written testimony describes where the error is and how to remedy it. We urge a favorable report for House Bill 134 with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, is the sponsor aware of the drafting error?
We've provided the sponsor with our written testimony.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, that ends the hearing on HB 134. Thank you, Delegate Taveras. We will call up now HB 400, Delegate Williams, State Finance Prohibited Appropriations, Magnetic Levitation Transportation System. Delegate, do you have a panel?
I don't think so. That just in terms of favorable. I know there's some folks that are probably here unfavorable.
Well,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Delegate, you're sitting, you're going to sit with her? Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Oh, you're in favor as well? Yes, you can come on up as well. Thank you. Sure. Hi. Hi, how are you? Normally it's Emmett, and I didn't see you in the back there. I'm not as tall. Okay.
Delegate, you can begin when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Boyce and the members of the wonderful Environment and Transportation Committee. I am Delegate Nicole Williams here in support of House Bill 400. And just for the record, this bill is known as the State Finance Prohibited Appropriations Magnetic Levitation Transportation System. For those who are new to this committee, basically the gist of this bill is that it would prohibit the state of Maryland from using appropriations or any funding for a possible magnetic levitation transportation system. And just for the record, I'm definitely in favor of mass transit. This is not an anti-transit bill by any stretch of the imagination, but we do believe that with any mass transit, if it's not done by the state, if it's being proposed to be done by a private company and a private entity, we feel that that private entity and that private company should absorb the cost for the construction of that transportation system. And so that is really the gist of this bill. It is not to preclude mass transit in any way. We understand that there is some opposition to this bill and some of the critical arguments concerning the benefits that such a transportation system would provide. But like I said, we do feel as though that this should not be borne on the backs of the taxpayers of the state of Maryland. And we also understand that, this technology, it could be seen as very shiny and new and inviting. The opponents of this bill would propose that this is to construct a train system that would take you all the way from Washington, D.C. to New York City and possibly even further north to, say, Boston. But however, none of the other states along the 95 corridor have given any type of approval with regards to the construction of this particular device. In fact, Maryland is the only state along the 95 corridor that has even remotely have been engaged with this private entity to date. And so while their marketing materials seem very promising, in reality, it does not seem as though there is any means as this to actually coming to fruition at this time. And so Our worry about not passing this bill is really to ensure that the private company who would be responsible for the construction of this train, who says that they do not need any money from the state, by the way, will continue to hold to their promises that they will not need any money from the state in order to construct this project. And so by passing this legislation, we can hold them to that promise and ensure that we are able to spend our state funds on other priorities, such as improving our current transportation system, improving our neighborhoods, and bettering our education for our children. And so for those reasons, I ask that you please give a favorable report for House Bill 400.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair and members of my favorite committee, House ENT. Hello, my name is David Pendleton. I'm the Director of the Maryland Safety and Legislative Board for the Transportation Division of SMART. Our members in the state of Maryland are employees of CSX Transportation, Norfolk Southern, Canton Railroad, Amtrak, and MARC. We work as conductors, engineers, switchmen, trainmen, utility workers, and yard masters. We are the train union. We're here in favorable report of HB 400, State Finance Prohibited Appropriations, Magnetic Levitation Transportation Systems. HB 400 will prevent the state and certain units and instrumentalities of the state from any appropriation for a Maglev system or organization as opposed to its construction. Maglev will only stop in Washington, BWI Airport, and Baltimore Penn Station. Well, last year, 6.5 million rode Amtrak and MARC to DC. And out of that number, 840,000 passengers used those services to BWI Airport, and 1.6 million used it to Baltimore Penn Station. These two services meets the needs of rail travel between Washington and Baltimore. However, these systems do need investment to maintain and modernize their systems. With our budget deficit, it makes no sense to divert much-needed dollars to a new system with cost estimates ranging from $10 billion to as high as $26.5 billion. Especially to a system that would only decrease travel between these two cities by 15 minutes and would only be used by a fraction of the population. At a time when income inequality as a result of the disparity in opportunities is so obvious, we do not need to exacerbate this problem by investing in an ultra-expensive, unnecessary system. Simply put, Maglev is to rail travel what the Concorde was to air travel, and we all know how that ended. We'll end up holding the bag on this. So thank you for your consideration of our positions at this time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. My name is Amy Niesel, and I'm speaking today in capacity as a council member for the City of Greenbelt to support House Bill 400. The proposed SC Maglev project raises many significant concerns, particularly around the prudent use of Maryland's state resources and its environmental impacts. 1, state resources would much better support existing rail service. Marylanders currently enjoy a robust public transportation system, including high-speed Amtrak, MTA and MARC trains, and WMATA, all of which provide greater access and affordability to our state's residents than the proposed Maglev would. Additionally, each of these services will soon require great public investment to sustain and improve the existing infrastructure. Funding for these services, as well as bicycle and pedestrian connections and ways to move commuters to our transit hubs, are the best place to put taxpayer resources. 2, there has been incomplete transparency in the information presented to the public about the Maglev. It does not show operating and maintenance costs offsetting the revenues as was originally promised. There are many significant unanswered questions about the financial viability of the project. And further, as Delegate Williams pointed out, the project was originally touted as a private venue, and it now appears that public funding will be sought. If the project is indeed financially viable, it should be supported by private investment and operating revenues, not public monies. 3, damage to the environment and natural resources. This project would destroy sensitive environmental resources, impacting rare, threatened, and endangered species, and eliminating vast swaths of tree canopy in Maryland. Further, the proposed Maglev would impact nearly 89 acres of wetland and up to 39 acres of Maryland wetlands of special state concern. The impacts to wetlands in the Greenbelt Forest Preserve along the Goddard Branch are of particular concern to Greenbelt. 4, it will not relieve congestion. Norman Marshall of Smart Mobility, who assisted Greenbelt with its review, stated that the supposed congestion relief for non-Maglev travelers will not materialize. Instead, construction of the SC Maglev will create a 2-tier system for a fast ride for the affluent and negative consequences for everyone else. Especially right now, this is not the equal access that Marylanders deserve.
Thank you,
I
Mrs.
ask that
Nielsen,
HB 400 be given a favorable report.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Delegate Williams and this panel? Yes, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I'm looking at this, I guess what you're trying to suggest is a belt and suspenders approach here, that they have said they're not going to propose any state funds. So now we're going to make sure that that does not happen. Is that correct?
That is correct, Delegate Holmes, yes.
Thank you.
Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Williams, and to your panel. And I appreciate, Delegate Williams, that you underscored in your introductory testimony that you're not opposed to transit and improving mass transit. That's very clear. I want to make sure I understand the tension between the potential for high-speed rail in Maryland and the downside of the particular project that's being discussed, because it's not even a proposal yet. Am I correct?
That is correct. There's still my brain is drawing a blank. The study has been put on pause.
NEPA.
The NEPA study has been put on pause with the federal government. And so that's pretty much where the project stands at this point.
So in my district, in the 46th district in Baltimore City, my constituents have made it clear that they're skeptical, if not outright opposed, to the idea of Maglev, because we have so many other pressing needs. We need to improve our bus system, et cetera. So do you think there's any possibility in the near future that a Maglev project could move forward with planning any of the stages that would fall under a transit infrastructure project?
Yeah, I think in the future, I think, like I said, I'm not against the technology itself. One of the concerns that we have is basically this private enterprise using state funding for the construction of this project. The other concerns that was raised is some of the environmental impacts that this project would have and things like that. But I think if the state down the road or nationally with Amtrak and other current systems that we already have here in place here in the state of Maryland, if they wanted to take the time to improve their technologies so that they are able to travel at even higher speeds than what we have now with, say, the Acela, I think that is something that just globally we should be exploring, as a state and as a country. How do we continue to transport people to workplaces and places of recreation in a cost-effective and rapid way? I mean, one of the other concerns with this, as was stated earlier, the proposed ticket price of this would be roughly around $35 per person one way, which would be very cost prohibitive to the average commuter who is just simply trying to commute back and forth to work. To buy a ticket one way on MARC is like a third of that cost. And so, I think that something like this, if we are looking for a way to transport people, people commute to their jobs and things like that, I think as a state, we should really be studying that in a very cohesive way, in a way that we are utilizing the infrastructure that we already have in place, and in a way that it would be cost beneficial to the residents of the state of Maryland and not harmful to our environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? At this time, we will go to the virtual favorable witnesses. Rhonda Kranz. Rhonda, you can begin when you're ready.
And so I think that something like this,
Rhonda,
looking for a way
Rhonda,
to transport people.
Rhonda,
People commute
please,
to their job.
Rhonda.
She needs to turn off the light.
Oh, no.
We should really
Rhonda, turn off your,
cohesive way, in a way that we're utilizing the infrastructure that we already have in place, and in a way that it would be
message her? Can you
beneficial
actually write a
to
message to
residents
her?
of the state of Maryland and not harmful to our environment.
Rhonda, can you hear me? It's a delay. It's because she's watching it. Okay, you can hear me. Can you turn off, I guess, the YouTube that you're watching, because it's a delay and it's creating some feedback. And you're on mute. You are on mute. You are on mute. Oh, there's such a delay.
Yes.
Okay, turn off.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, turn that off, and then, so there's not a delay.
Trying to get out of it. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're certainly patient, but it's
Okay.
causing a
You
delay.
good now?
Okay, good. Please start. 2 minutes.
Apologize. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee. I'm Rhonda Krantz, and I'm the president of the Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit. We evaluate transit projects for the safety, economic viability, and environmental and social justice, and represent a statewide coalition of organizations and concerned residents. And although we do not support the proposed Maglev for many of the reasons that have been described here, I will focus on the economics. To date, no major public rail system in the world operates without government subsidy. Taxpayers have already covered the over $5 million federal and state dollars for the current SC Maglev environmental assessment process, and will require dozens of state permits, each costing the state significant funds. This is the same process that any future Maglev project would incur. The BWRR is a private company that has stated publicly that it will not seek state funds. Yet their arguments in opposition to this bill say they want the money to be available just in case financial support is needed later in the project's implementation. Given that federal funds have been fully expended for this project and the possibility of more funds is unlikely in the current federal administration, it seems likely that later will be sooner. Maryland's transportation investment face persistent state funding difficulties, especially now with the current budget deficit. Cost cutting and choices need to be made. Maryland should be focusing on providing affordable and accessible transportation for all members of our communities. Maryland residents should not have to bear the financial cost of any Maglev project that is not fully funded by the private developer, especially if the project runs into difficulties and escalating costs, as we have seen in previous transportation projects. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and I urge a favorable vote on HB 0400. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm going to go to the next virtual witness, Daryl Carrington. Nope, he's not here. Does anyone have any questions for Rhonda? No? Thank you so much. Seeing none, we will move to a favorable with amendment, a virtual witness, Kashana Cross. No Kashana Cross. Okay, we will move to unfavorable. Jose Suero, Ian Rainey, Ray Baker, and Adrian Harpool. All can come up, and whoever sits first can begin. Please remember to state your name for the record, and that it is 2 minutes.
Dear Vice Chair Boyce and members of the committee, my name is Ian Rainey, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail. I appear before you today to convey strong opposition to HB 0400. This bill aims to prohibit any appropriations from being used by the state for a magnetic levitation system in Maryland. One of the main arguments behind this bill is that the Maryland taxpayer should not be on the hook for a project like ours, implying that state funds are better used elsewhere to improve and upgrade existing transit systems. And we agree the state should focus on improving state-run transportation projects, which is why we have never asked the state for financial support. But our current transportation infrastructure has already nearly met its physical limits. And in fact, the draft environmental impact statement for the Maglev project conducted by Maryland DOT and the Federal Railroad Administration confirms that the Baltimore-Washington Maglev service would in fact alleviate pressure on current transportation infrastructure and Maryland taxpayers. In other words, by alleviating stress on systems that are approaching overcapacity, such as MARC and Amtrak, taxpayers will see savings through added transit capacity and reduced traffic without state appropriations. We need new world-class transportation systems to build our economy, create jobs, fight climate change, and provide workforce opportunities in Maryland. HB 0400 would signal to Maryland citizens, the country, and the world that this state is closed to innovative, future-oriented, safe solutions to our worsening transportation challenges. For these reasons, we strongly oppose HB 0400 and urge the committee to submit an unfavorable report. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair Corman and members of this committee. My name is Jose Sueiro, and I am submitting this testimony on behalf of Metro DC Hispanic Contractors Association to express our opposition to House Bill 400, which proposes to prohibit the use of state appropriations for the development or implementation of a Maglev transportation system in Maryland. As an organization dedicated to empowering Hispanic contractors and advancing equitable opportunities for community builders, we believe HB 400 would eliminate significant economic and professional opportunities for the small business community while also hindering Maryland's progress towards innovative transportation solutions. The Maglev project represents a major infrastructure undertaking that would provide countless opportunities for small Hispanic and minority contractors and other small business owners to participate and benefit from public projects that include subcontracting opportunities. Large-scale infrastructure projects like Maglev rely heavily on subcontractors for a variety of services, from construction and electrical work to landscaping and maintenance. Hispanic contractors in Maryland could be well-positioned to secure these contracts, fostering economic growth within their communities. Workforce development projects of this scale create jobs across multiple industries. And the Maglev system is not just a transportation project, it's a transformative initiative that could modernize Maryland's infrastructure, making it a leader in efficient, high-speed transportation. This would enhance connectivity between economic hubs, reduce travel times, and increase the region's competitiveness on a national scale. The ripple effects of such a project would extend to small businesses, service providers, and local communities. Maryland has made significant strides in promoting diversity and inclusion in state-funded projects by barring appropriations for Maglev HB 400. It would undercut these efforts, depriving Hispanic and other community-based firms of access to contracts and resources.
We thank you so much for your testimony. Who's next? Good to see you, Mr. Harpool.
Good to see you too, Vice Chair. So my name is Adrian Harpool, and I represent a group called My Business Counts. We were established back when the Moore-Miller administration did an executive order to promote and encourage more minority participation in state contracts. That's also been amplified to the private sector. We were glad to see the Maglev group take on the commitment that the governor and others have stated, and thus $4 billion of that $10 billion has been committed to minority business opportunities. I joined about 400 or 500 other minority-owned businesses, 2 events we held 2 years ago, one at Coppin State and the other one at Bowie, to learn more about Maglev, The interest there was very significant and led me to join some others in traveling this past summer to Japan to see the Maglev for myself. Some of the concerns that I've heard raised are certainly valid, but I will say in many instances did not bear out. I traveled on Maglev myself. It was a quiet, very swift travel. I visited a number of the communities where Maglev was being constructed, went into the tunnels where the train was being expanded, and saw very little disruption of those homes or those communities. In fact, the development that ensued around the various Maglev stations was significant, created a lot of opportunities, short-term and long-term. There are people that I met there who've been, their entire career has been around the Maglev construction and operation. We want to make sure that this committee delivers an unfavorable report around the House Bill 400.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Boyce. For the record, my name is Ray Baker. I serve as the Maryland Director for the Baltimore, D.C. Building Trades. You have my written testimony, so I will not belabor us very long. I appreciate the spirit of this legislation, but unfortunately, we would ask for an unfavorable report, primarily because it seems to be a solution in search of a problem. We do not think that this will ultimately be beneficial. As we've heard from colleagues before, this project has not asked for state funds, and there are federal funds that have already been allocated to it. However, should we move down the line and realize that the state need to make a worthwhile investment to ensure jobs for so many of my members who live in so many of your districts, it would behoove us to not have anything on the books that we would then have to go back and then try to overturn. We recognize that this committee is one of our most judicious and efficient, but some of our colleagues may not always move so swiftly. And so if we have something that's already on the books that makes it difficult for us to go and get the necessary funds we need to advance our state, both economically and with transportation, that this legislation now, at a time when it is not necessary, would overly and unduly complicate that. So with that, we ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are quite welcome, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I read the bill, and as suggested by the sponsor of the bill, there's nothing in here or that has been discussed by the sponsor that suggests that the sponsor or the language in the bill is against the transportation system that's proposed to be built. It's also been said over the years that the manufacturers or the construction teams that are thinking about putting this maglev in doesn't need state money. Therefore, if you don't need it and it's not proposing to shut down the transportation system, what is wrong with the bill?
I'll take that, Delegate. As I said in my testimony, I think this bill sends a very bad message from the state. It singles out a very specific transportation project. I think that sends a message that the state is really not interested in high-speed rail, technological innovations in transportation. So that's one problem I have with the bill. Another problem I have with the bill, and it alludes to what another witness just mentioned, I think this is the type of bill that creates a great danger of unintended consequences. We do not need state funding to construct the Maglev project. The funding is anticipated to come from a mixture of grant funding and financing, both from the US federal government and from the Japanese government. However, it's entirely possible, it's plausible that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, at some point in the future, the state may conclude that it's actually in the state's interests to invest in this project. That could be contributing to the cost of construction, or it could be something much more mundane, like, for example, improving intermodal connectivity to the Maglev, a bus parking lot or something like that. We have no idea. If a bill like this were on the books, it would essentially preclude MDOT or MTA from even conducting a feasibility study into the value of that kind of an investment. So we are not asking the state for funding. We're a private company. We have no ability to extract funding from the state. We can only ask for it. The state can always say no. But if a future legislature or executive branch in Maryland concludes that it's in the state's interest to invest in this project, it seems like it would be very detrimental to have a law in the books preventing them from even considering it.
If I may have a follow-up. Yes. If there was a need for a feasibility study or any of those types of state permitting and review processes, the bill specifically states that that's okay.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
You go ahead.
I don't have the bill in front of me. I think the bill has a carve-out for the cost of salaries of state personnel who are engaged in routine permitting activities. But if the state, for example, wanted to construct an intermodal center to enable better bike or bus connectivity to the Maglev, if the state concluded that it would be in its interest to conduct a parking lot for state employees to have better access to the Maglev, I mean, the list of possibilities of things like that is almost infinite. There is no carve-out in the bill. And moreover, I think it's possible the state could conclude it's in the state's interest in the future to contribute to the actual capital cost of the project. Now, as I say, we are not asking that, but it's not inconceivable 10 years from now that the state might decide, yes, we should invest in this. This is a good deal for Marylanders.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Holmes also asked what I was going to ask, but I want to follow up a little bit. So if I understand your answers correctly, you've never asked for appropriations from the state, and you don't plan to, but you want to leave the option open. Is that fair to say?
That is a way to characterize it, yes, Delegate.
And so I'm sure you know that our transportation budget is, we're having, short enough. We have to worry about which projects get funded because there's not enough for everything. So why should this project, which is a private developer, have the option of getting funded when my community has been waiting 10 years since the previous governor canceled the red line that would have served my community?
Well, again, as I pointed out earlier, Delegate, it's entirely up to the state, to the legislature and the executive to choose whether to invest in different projects. I mean, we can request funding, but we're a private company. We have no ability to get funding. We have no ability to decide whether the state invests in our project. But one important point I would make out, and I noted this in my testimony, in the draft environmental impact statement for this project, which was prepared by the state of Maryland in coordination with the Federal Railroad Administration, they estimate that state transit systems, including MARC, are going to be over capacity between 2030 and 2045. And that will require significant additional investments in those systems. If the Maglev project goes forward, and this is MDOT's estimate in the environmental impact statement, not ours, it will relieve capacity on those systems. So this project will actually save Maryland taxpayers from having to invest to create additional capacity in Maryland's transit systems.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the gentlemen on the panel. I wanted to direct my question to the two gentlemen who represent the interests of minority business interests in the transportation construction field. So Mr. Suero and the good gentleman who traveled to Japan. I'm so sorry, I don't see your name on our list. It's probably just me. Mr. Harpool?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So to Mr. Suero and to Mr. Harpool, I'm curious if either of you has had an opportunity as folks in the business of doing construction on transportation projects or with an interest in doing construction on transportation projects, if either of you has had the opportunity to work on existing transportation and construction projects that we already have. For example, the Purple Line or road repairs or other initiatives in the state. I guess, Mr. Suero, you could go first.
Yes, we do. We have about 350 members, of which approximately 35% are Maryland-based, and a number of my members work on the Purple Line. One of our members is and Luis Construction, which does asphalt and paving all over Maryland and Baltimore, et cetera. So yeah, we have a number of members that are capable of doing this, and we estimate it would be a great boon for a great many. We're all small businesses. We're not, this is not, we don't represent large GCs or corporations. So this would be a great deal of economic activity for our membership.
And there are other projects like the Key Bridge, for example, which we pray will come online soon. That would create opportunities for good folks working in your space.
Right. We have folks that have bid on this, or I think already working on the Key Bridge proposal project.
Thank you, Mr. Suero. Mr. Harp, if I may, Mr. Harp.
Yes, in fact, I can use this one. So we have not as to date, and I think that's one of the things that was so attractive about the opportunity to support and to see Maglev move forward. In previous administrations in Maryland, and again, we're all been around. We just heard about the red line being pulled by a previous governor, and so that particular governor, in the 8 years that he was in office, totally disregarded the opportunities for minority businesses. The goals that were set and set back since the Glenn administration for 28, 29% participation were not adhered to, were not met. There was no accountability around that. Conversely, the folks at Maglev have acknowledged and committed to 40% participation by minority businesses and have already begun meeting with businesses, talking with many of them about the types of opportunities that Maglev represents, and which is one of the reasons that we really wholeheartedly support moving forward with this project.
Thank you. And Mr. Harple, thank you for your remarks. And Mr. Suero, I mean, you make very persuasively the case for infrastructure investment. It creates jobs, it creates opportunity, it addresses climate, all of the goals that we all share clearly. And I really commend you for that. And I think we all align with the current administration's commitment to MBE, WBE, small business growing opportunity. But I still feel a little bit confused because there are lots of infrastructure construction opportunities in Maryland right now and in the region. And it strikes me as somewhat, interesting that this focus on Maglev, which is a project that's, the NEPA study's already been canceled. There's so much more that could be done. So for you particularly, Mr. Harpole, I was just curious, your interest in Maglev, you were able to travel. Did you travel on your own to Japan to visit the high-speed rail there, which I've also ridden it. It is truly amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It was a decision for me to make. So when you say on my own, Maglev covered the cost of my travel. But I will tell you that I spent a week on the road with them. Our typical day there was up at 7 a.m. to get a shuttle service to go out to the various sites. We worked all day. In fact, we were there during a time when Japan recorded its highest temperatures on record, several days in excess of 107 degrees. 7 a.m. in the morning until 6 or 6 in the evening, returning to our hotel, oftentimes for meetings, briefings. Did that for 7 days without any compensation. So that was a personal investment of mine. I will tell you that Japan was a beautiful country, but it wasn't on my bucket list. So short of going on this particular case, I did not, this was not a trip to a resort. It was not a, what do you call a junket? We very little leisure time. What there was available, we used to sleep. And I say that because I wasn't convinced prior to this trip that the opportunity that had been held out was possible. But I met with a number of Japanese business persons, visited those sites, saw the development, the construction, I think we call it now transit-oriented development that occurred around those stops. And it let me know that there's a significant opportunity here. And you're right, there are a lot of projects that are underway right now, and our minority businesses are doing their best to take advantage. But facing forward, many of the projects we're talking about today, the Purple Line, one day will be finished. Some of these other projects will be done. So we're looking ahead at opportunities that may not be apparent today, but they will future-proof our businesses and create opportunities moving forward.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm not sure which members will speak directly. Is it one or two of you? Okay. So I don't know, how long have you been working on this project? How long have you been involved?
We started looking at this project around 2010, Delegate.
But how long have you directly been?
Since its inception.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I've ever crossed paths with you before, but I was previously the Prince George's County Council member that represented South Laurel, the area that my good friend Delegate Holmes represents at the state level. And there was strong opposition in that part of Prince George's County to this project for a number of reasons I'm not going to rehash. But I held a meeting toward the end of my second term, so it would have been 2017 or 2018, attended by hundreds of people from South Laurel. And I had a Maglev representative admit on the record that, yes, eventually we will need subsidies for this project. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So my question to you is, first of all, do you consider Maglev to this project to be, if it ever comes about, a mass transit system?
Well, if I can address the statement that that I guess one of my colleagues made in the past, I don't know the context behind it. I can assure you that is not our position. We've never contemplated asking the state or the federal government for subsidies. What my colleague may have meant is that we absolutely will and have been very transparent about the fact that we will ask the federal government for grants. Now, most people would not consider grants subsidies, but you could characterize them in that fashion. So if that's what they meant, then yes, we will be seeking grants from the federal government.
Okay, to my question about, do you consider this mass transit?
The Department of Transportation and Maryland Department of Transportation typically would not classify high-speed intercity passenger rail as a transit system. That being said, this is a very short initial segment from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. And so surely many of the riders would probably fall into the category of travelers who are transit travelers. They're commuting to work, for example, during the day. But the technical definition of a high-speed intercity passenger rail project is not transit. It would be high-speed transportation.
Okay, so my last question, Madam Chair, is that do you know of any, whatever you want to call this system, similar system, however you categorize it, in the United States being able to operate without subsidies?
Well, the U.S.
Subsidies, not grants.
Right. I don't necessarily want to speak for other systems without knowing all the details, but my understanding is that the Amtrak Northeast Corridor operates without subsidies. It cross-subsidizes other parts of the Amtrak network. The Brightline system in Florida, I do not believe receives any subsidies. Those are the two intercity passenger rail systems that I'm familiar with. But as I'm sure you know, Delegate, we don't really have a high-speed system in the United States. I mean, even Amtrak, which touts the Acela as being high-speed rail, by any definition of that term in Europe or Asia, is not high-speed rail. I think it averages 86 miles per hour.
Okay, well, I only asked the question that way because you equivocated about whether you consider Maglev mass transit. But I don't know of any mass transit system in this country. I don't think there are any that are able to operate without subsidies. I think that's a fact that can't be disputed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the committee giving us a few minutes to look at this very important issue. To the gentleman from Maglev, I'm not clear from what you were saying. Has the environmental impact statement and the NEPA study, has the pause been lifted? Is that now operational? Are you going forward now?
The project remains paused on what's called the federal dashboard, which is kind of the official database of projects receiving federal funding. It remains paused on the federal dashboard. However, there has been activity. In fact, just a few months ago, Maryland Department of Transportation and the Federal Railroad Administration completed their review of the comments that were submitted on the draft environmental impact statement by the federal landowning agencies. As you know, the project traverses a lot of federal properties, so that's a big issue for FRA. That review process wrapped up, I believe, late last year. I would have to defer to MDOT and the FRA on what the next steps are going to be. But I guess the point is that although the project went on pause in 2021, I mean, there has been meaningful activity and progress on NEPA, on the environmental impact statement since that time.
And you've been quoting from a report in your testimony. Could you provide the committee with a copy of that report that you've been quoting from?
Yes, certainly. Yes,
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you for the second bite, Madam Chair. So in Maryland, we consider public transit to be a public good. It's something we provide for the residents of Maryland. We don't require the fare to completely cover all the operational costs. But as a private entity, you would need to at least operate at some kind of a profit. Is that correct?
Yes, Delegate.
So there's really no guarantee you can give that the fares that you would charge would be on par with fares for something like MARC.
They would not be on par with fares like MARC. I mean, a MARC ticket is, I think, 2/3 covered by Maryland taxpayers.
So why would it be a better investment for Maryland to invest in a private company than to invest in our own public good transit systems for increasing the capacity and frequency for our own citizens?
I don't necessarily think it has to be an either-or proposition, Delegate. I mean, this system, what we're talking about, is going to take probably 10 years to construct, probably longer than that, before we begin revenue service. We all recognize the state is facing budget constraints right now, but we're not asking the state for any appropriations in the near term. We're not asking the state to subsidize our operating costs or the cost of construction. And I think the notion that we have to choose between good transit and intercity high-speed passenger rail is kind of a false choice. I mean, we live on the Northeast Corridor. This is the economic jewel of the United States, and it's the economically most competitive place in the world. We should have the best of both systems.
Respectfully, it's not a false choice if you're talking about state dollars. If it's completely privately invested, that's great. But if you're talking about state dollars, there's a limited amount to go around. This year certainly, but always we don't have enough for all the transit that we should have in Maryland. So I guess I'm just trying to understand why the state should invest in a private business.
Again, Delegate, no one's asking the state to do that.
Then this is no problem for us to pass this bill then, right?
Well, it is a problem because 15 years from now, I think the state could be in quite a different position. And I think it's plausible that the state might conclude it's very much in its economic interests and the interests of its citizens to invest in the Maglev. We don't know what the situation will be like in 15 years. And I've heard the argument when this bill has been raised before, well, we can just repeal the legislation if there's consensus that the state should do that. But our experience has shown that that can be much more difficult than we might anticipate. There was a prohibition similar to this one in place for a very long time in the state. And it really hindered the state even considering deployment of Maglev. And I think it goes back to my earlier comment. I think this type of legislation can have very nefarious unintended consequences in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we call up our about 3 virtual witnesses, I just want to clarify what you're saying. Essentially, you're saying is that your opposition potentially is that while you may not seek appropriations, what you're seeking is not to what you're seeking is not to I guess legislate against the technology. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Because I hear you say like in years come, because in years come there's not a Maglev, there's a Boysev, and I decide that I want to do this with the state, and I have money, and maybe the state invests in it. What I hear you saying is that this bill goes against the technology potentially being used in the state years from now if the state were to change its mind and there's magnetic levitation all over the country, and then we would then decide, because we have this amazing, robust transportation system, we may decide that we would want it. You're saying this legislation would prevent us from doing so. Is that what you're saying?
Vice Chair, I think my argument is a little bit different. What I'm saying, what I'm saying is, let's, I guess, posit a scenario where this project does go forward.
Sure.
It's funded and financed by the federal government with a financial contribution from the Japanese government. So no Maryland state dollars have to go into the construction of the project. The project is being built, say we're 10 years in the future, and the state realizes, well, this project, this is great. We think it's going to be great for Maryland, but we really need to improve, say, intermodal connectivity at the Baltimore terminal of the Maglev project. We need better bus connectivity to the station, or we need some kind of intermodal connectivity at BWI. Or let's suppose there's a situation where the state concludes, okay, this project is near the finish line. It's really great. There's broad consensus that this is going to be great for Maryland. The construction has been a huge economic boost. And it turns out that we do need, say, some funding from the state to construct a portion of it, or we need some right-of-way contribution or something like that from the state. We just don't want to preclude the possibility of even having that discussion 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. Okay. We are not asking the state for any funding, but we just don't want to close the door because we know how long it can take to repeal that legislation, even if there is consensus that it would be a good investment for the state.
But to your point, an appropriation is an appropriation. So maybe it's not money, but like when we're talking about easements, when we're talking about land, an appropriation or permissions would have to be given to you, because what you're saying is that you have a great idea to construct in my house, but I don't agree with you constructing in my house. Therefore, you're getting funding, and then maybe at some point I'll decide to let you construct in my house, and then give you other easements and access so that you can construct on my house, even though it's not your house, right? Maryland doesn't belong to Maglev per se, right? So you're funding a project that has not necessarily been approved in Maryland with the hopes that it would be approved in Maryland. And so at some point you would be looking for some type of appropriation, if not financially. It may be an easement, maybe some land, it may be
something of monetary value potentially, or an actual appropriation.
Which is an appropriation, yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll go to the virtual witnesses. First one is Anwar Young. Welcome to the committee. Good to see you, Mr. Young. 2 minutes.
Good to see you, Chair Boyce. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. And for the record, my name is Anwar Young, and I stand in opposition to House Bill 400. Some have questioned the feasibility and/or necessity of high-speed rail, but this summer, as Mr. Harpool mentioned, I had the opportunity to travel to Japan, where I saw this technology in action. I joined a delegation of minority business owners, civil rights advocates, and community leaders, and we witnessed firsthand how high-speed rail revitalized that region and expanded opportunities for historically marginalized communities. However, HB 400 threatens to eliminate this opportunity before Marylanders have a full chance to really evaluate its benefits. Blocking any future appropriations, as this proposes, prevents Maryland from engaging in any role that could make the project viable, even for things like environmental studies, workforce development, or infrastructure integration. Cutting off state appropriations prematurely sends the wrong messages to businesses and investors who see Maryland as a leader in innovation and infrastructure. Instead of rushing to block funding, we should commit to a transparent and data-driven process that allows Marylanders to fully assess the project's impact before we make any final decisions. For these reasons, I urge the committee to issue an unfavorable report on HB 400, and I thank you for your time and consideration. And apologies for my voice. I am suffering with the flu, so apologies, Chair Boyce.
Well, thank God you're on the screen. We hope you recover very soon, Mr. Youngs. Good to see you. Next, Daniel Trujillo Esmeril. I'm sorry, I just butchered your name. So disrespectful. I'm so sorry. You're on mute. You're on mute. Danielle, you're on mute.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone. My name is Daniel Trujillo Esmeril. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to testify in opposition to HB 400. With over 1,000 member businesses, Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce goal is to assist Hispanic businesses to develop strong relationships as potential customers and vendors. The Chamber's common ties provide insights into markets, purchasing power, and spending habits. We've written our testimony, so I will be brief as to why we believe negatively on HB 400. Given the background of our organization, we believe this passage of this legislation would appear obstructionist and make a strong statement about Maryland and state leadership as to the closing off of innovation within our state. We believe the state and the region should be open to any and all ideas that seek to improve our pressing problems of congestion, which threaten our economy's growth on a daily basis. Large-scale investments in our state should be encouraged as they provide substantial jobs and enhancement to the economic health of our business community. With much more serious issues impacting Maryland, and in particular, Hispanic business owners, we would request that the legislature strike down this bill that does nothing more than to tell Japan we are not interested. The Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce urges the committee to reject HB 400. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to check one more time. Is Asha or Aisha Bond? Nope. Does anyone have questions for our virtual witnesses? Thank you so much. Seeing none, that ends the hearing on HB 400. Calling up next, HB 517, Delegate Corman Solomon, Transportation, Maryland Area Rail Commuter Rail Authority Establishment, Mark Rail Authority Act of 2025. Mr. Chair, do you have a panel or?
I think I'm on my own. Mr. You want to join me, Mr. Pendleton? Come on.
We'll try to take it easy on you. You can start when you're ready.
Could never leave the chairman on his own. That ain't gonna work.
Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues. What better way to spend Valentine's Day than with my favorite committee, talking about my favorite commuter rail system. We even have some guest stars from my formerly favorite committee, the Transit Lovers from Appropriations, to talk about the Mark Rail Authority Act of 2025. We spend a lot of time talking about newfangled technology like maglev and monorail, but it turns out we already have train lines that run along these same corridors that we talk about on other bills, and they are our state's commuter rail system. And I hope we can spend a little bit more time talking about how to make what we currently have run and work a little bit better. This bill was born, frankly, from frustration. Many times when our transportation budget is in trouble, which seems to happen with some regularity, the first thing on the chopping block, or that we pull back on, is the MARC rail system, the commuter rail system. I think most of you know this, but it's basically 3 rail lines. One runs from DC through Montgomery County to Frederick and breaks west. One runs from DC to Baltimore and beyond, and someday hopefully will connect up through Delaware. That's the Penn line. And one runs from DC to Baltimore, ending at Camden Yards, or AKA my happy place. So I want these to work better, and unfortunately, as I said, oftentimes when our transportation budget is in trouble, the first thing that sort of suffers is the MARC rail system. A very recent example of this is we had advanced as a state negotiations with CSX, which owns the Brunswick line, and I should say I occasionally do legal work for CSX, so they're not on this issue, obviously. We had advanced negotiations in the state with CSX to run more service on the Brunswick line through Montgomery County, and like Charlie Brown on the football, the state pulled back from that because of the budget shortfalls. We've had similar situations in the past. During the right before the Great Recession, Governor O'Malley had unveiled a really exciting MARC rail expansion and improvement plan. And when the Great Recession hit, first thing to get pulled back was that investment in the MARC rail system. So the point of House Bill 517 is to try to give MARC rail sort of a higher priority and focus in our Maryland Department of Transportation, because our structure is very, very unusual. I believe there is no other state where the statewide transit agency is also in charge of providing the local service in one of their cities, because the MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration, not only runs MARC rail, they're not only trying to build the Purple Line in Montgomery and Prince George's County, or plan the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. I'm sorry, Delegate Davis left the room when I name-checked her favorite project. They not only provide the funding for lots to all of our counties, but they also run the local transit service in the city of Baltimore, the light rail, the subway, and the bus system, as well as paratransit. Obviously really important that we have those services in Baltimore. But what it does is it means we have sort of one agency that's just honestly in charge of too many things. And again, no other state does it this way. So this bill's approach is to pull the MARC rail out and put it in a separate authority that would have a separate board. In the future, if it had dedicated funding, it could do separate bonding. It's almost like the Maryland Transportation Authority we have for roads. This would be a MARC rail authority for the MARC system. That's not necessarily the only answer to the problem that I have raised. And my hope to you all is that we can figure out maybe what the right answer is if you don't like this one. There's a possibility we could break more things off of the current MTA. We could essentially split MTA into 2. We could have one, what they call transportation business unit for the local service in Baltimore, and one for sort of everything else, the statewide functions. Now, there's obviously, and I'm cognizant that the chair is from Baltimore. Obviously, we have Delegate Lewis and many others in the room who are much more equipped to talk about what's best for the city of Baltimore than I am. But I'm cognizant that part of this is a funding issue, right? And it's true in the DC region too. The transit system is funded through state dollars, right? And so I don't want to do anything that harms that. And I do think there's sort of a long-term conversation we had about Baltimore City having more governance and control over its transit system. But I don't think we need to wait to have that sort of long-term solution to start making some organizational changes to make this sort of all work better statewide. Now, I will just note the version of the bill before you is a little different than my cross-file, which is Senator McCray. There was a little bit of a drafting issue, and he has some provisions in his bill related to how financing would work, and also a labor observer on the board. I'm very supportive of those provisions. It just didn't get in my version before the blueback went in. So if we move forward with some version of this, obviously I would bring forward an amendment to do that. But the purpose of this bill, in addition to sort of satisfying my need to try to do something over this frustration, is to basically start a conversation with all of you about how we can kind of organize this to work a little bit better in the future. And with that, Madam Chair and colleagues, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We do have a question from our guest, Delegate Edelson from Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Running the risk of asking the bill sponsor and chair a question, I realize that's interesting territory to be getting into. But the question I have is really, I appreciate the bill, and there are a number of us, obviously, who share those similar concerns that you do and are interested in engaging in that larger conversation about, are we getting the best out of the system, and what are the ways that we can do so? The concern that I'm hoping you could address is, if this bill moves forward as is, does it hinder our ability to have that larger conversation? Because we're sort of stripping the administration for parts. And so then by the time that we're going to try to have that larger conversation, Mark is over here, maybe commuter buses over there, and we're not really, sort of go down that road, and we're not in a position to sort of sit down and say, what is the best way to have this holistic conversation, recognizing that can result in delay, but that there is the risk that we go far down that road.
Sure. Well, thanks for the question, Delegate. You'd be surprised. Questions are always welcome in the Environment and Transportation Committee. I don't know how you do it downstairs. And I appreciate your leadership on this. Obviously, you share a district with Delegate Lewis and a great passion for these issues. I guess my problem is, what are we waiting for? I mean, I just got through the end of what was supposed to be a 2-year commission that the legislature set up that basically did nothing over 2 years. And that's where we're supposed to have these conversations. So I'm kind of tired of waiting, which is why I put the bill in, hoping to spark a little bit of action, just like this conversation. So I'm happy, like I said, to kind of amend this bill into a different form that takes this on a little bit differently. But I don't want to just do nothing because we hope someday to have a more serious conversation. We need to advance the ball. Somehow, this bill is my attempt at doing that.
If not now, when? I appreciate that. Thank you.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this bill. My question is, goes to the scope of the authority of the Rail Authority. So I'm just wondering, would this Rail Authority have the authority to negotiate with other rail systems like VRE, for example, or WMATA, just like what would be the scope of the authority of the organization?
Sure. So, first of all, I was really negligent not recognizing that Delegate Solomon is here. His name is on the bill, and he's a great leader on trying to improve the MARC rail system. The most immediate rail systems that we'll be able to negotiate with are the 2 landlord railroads, because none of these lines that the MARC system operates over are owned by the state. They're owned by Amtrak and the aforementioned CSX, so certainly they'd be able to negotiate with those entities. And yeah, I mean, this would be the entity that would be responsible for continuing the attempt the General Assembly's been making for quite a while under Delegate Solomon's leadership to have run-through service with the Virginia Railway Express, VRE. And there's a similar effort to make a connection with the Delaware commuter rail service that Delegate Hornberger has been a leader on. So yes, this would be the entity that would do that. The board, as envisioned in this bill, is actually a relatively small one. It's the Secretary of Transportation and 2 other appointees, hopefully as well with a board observer from labor in the future, and then the executive director of the authority would sit as a non-voting member of the board as well. Obviously, there's lots of ways we could sort of modify that to address different interests. I had a prior bill that was a broader rail authority, not just MARC rail, but broader issues in Maryland, and that had lots of other sort of potential observer members like Amtrak, like WMATA. This is much narrower in scope because it's more limited to the MARC rail, but yes, that would be the job of this entity.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this bill, Mr. Chair, and your co-sponsor, Delegate Solomon. I have so many questions. I could talk to you about this bill for hours, but it's Friday. And
also, you know how to reach me, Delegate Lewis.
But for the sake of this discussion, I'd be interested to know your take on the letter of information that was submitted by MDOT. It was a letter of information, neither supportive nor opposing your bill. That MDOT talked about the potential organizational implications of creating a new authority. They mentioned that creating a MARC Rail Authority would require the transfer of certain supervisory and operational duties out of MDOT to the new authority, redistributing roles, et cetera, new positions, new operational agreements. And I wondered from your perspective if those changes would be an obstacle to the establishment of the authority. And if so, how might those obstacles be overcome?
Yeah, Delegate Lewis, changing how the Maryland Department of Transportation does this work is not a bug, it's a feature, right? The point of the bill is to make changes with how the Maryland Department of Transportation does these things. And I'm not surprised, I know their testimony says informational, but I can read between the lines. I'm not surprised that they think they're doing things just fine. I don't think most of us who use these services share that view. And so that is the point of the bill, is to make changes. Now, certainly there could be some legitimate things that need to be sort of dealt with. For example, they have access agreements with the two landlord railroads, as I said. We need to make sure those agreements can be transferred over. I don't want to get too ahead of my skis here, but I had discussed that, pretty specifically with the Maryland Transit Administration and how that might work. So there are certainly details to work out, and a transition period would be necessary. But making changes at MDOT is the point. If they came back and said this requires no changes, I should probably just withdraw this bill, because the point of the bill is to make a change.
And if I may, Madam Chair, quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also curious about the role of labor in the vision for a future rail authority. And Mr. Pendleton is here. I don't believe after, but from your perspective, and you mentioned Senator McCrae's, the proposals that Senator McCrae made in his cross-file, but I wonder if you could talk from your point of view about the role of including the voices of labor in the establishment of the authority.
Sure. I mean, if you think about the way the authority is set up, management will be well represented by the Secretary of Transportation, and the executive director as a non-voting member. So sort of my philosophical view of the world is when you have management at the table, it's good to have labor there too. And so that would be the point of including a non-voting labor representative if we went with this sort of authority structure.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
We will hear from the co-sponsor and guest, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the hospitality and the aptly named MARC Rail system with the good chair. Thank you for your partnership on this bill and your leadership on this issue for a long time. I just wanted to ask you, we often compare ourselves to our neighbors to the south on things that, they're doing better than we are. Can you talk a little bit about the Northern Virginia Rail Authority and how they've used that to really just, double, triple, quadruple down on their investments in heavy commuter rail that's really made amazing connections in that part of the state?
Sure. Frankly, Delegate, you know a lot more about it than I do. But yes, Virginia is organized with sort of a similar authority structure. Their commuter rail runs through an authority, and they actually have a broader passenger rail authority to help with some of their intercity passenger service, which is, somewhat similar, but it's more like Amtrak than the sort of scheduled commuter rail service we're describing here. And so they've had great success with that, as have many other states. There's a whole interstate association of passenger rail authorities, and it would be great if Maryland could hop on board, so to speak, and move in that same direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Healy.
Chair, Mr. Chair, this is a brilliant idea. I really think this is great. As somebody who used to take the MARC train to the baseball games back in the day when they would run from DC up through my neighborhood, I really miss it, and I worked in Baltimore at one time, and I thought that it would have been great to have been able to take a MARC train to Baltimore and come back and be able to commute that way. So I'm very happy to take a look at this. Did you know, and I'm going to take Professor's prerogative for a minute. In 1986, there was, in Maryland, the Maryland State Railroad Administration, which was part of all of this. So, it goes around, comes around, and maybe we'll reinvent it in a way that works for the 21st century and forward. So I'm excited to work on this with you.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Actually, I knew a little bit about that, and the Mark Rail, as well as some other functions, used to sort of be in that office, and I just think that structure makes a lot more sense than what we have today. This is a little bit different because it's more of an independent authority than just another sort of modal administration in the Department of Transportation. But if it's the committee's will to do it sort of in the mid 80s to early 90s structure, I think that's great as well.
Thank you. Can I quickly ask, do you know why it was, I guess, abandoned?
I've heard a little bit of the sort of rumor mongering about it from the current Secretary of Transportation. I don't want to get too much into the rumor mill, but it sounds like, frankly, part of it was personalities and preferences rather than what was sort of best for the state and also what was best for Baltimore service.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. Pendleton, ready?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is David Pendleton, Director for the Maryland Safety and Legislative Board of the Transportation Division of SMART. I'm here today urging a favorable report for 517. It would create the Mark Rail Authority, allowing Mark to become its own independent agency operating on behalf of MDOT. Allowing Mark this authority to operate independently will allow it to become more efficient, growth-oriented, and effective and attentive to the needs of the public. Our neighbor rail commuter agency, the VRE, has had similar authority for decades while also having similar operations to Mark. According to its CEO's report in 2024, VRE actually came in $1.8 million under budget. And this was due largely to its leadership being able to operate without unnecessary bureaucracy. Despite ridership being only 30% of pre-pandemic levels, these efficiencies were achieved without having to lay off employees or make cuts to its service. In fact, VRE managed to expand during this time, starting constructions on many capital improvements totaling about around $125 million. Many more in the development and final planning stages, and it's creating thousands of good-paying union jobs in the process. Mark operates 3 times as many trains as the VRE. We run 7 days a week, and we haul more than double the passenger count. Imagine what Mark can do if it were given this same authority. And once this model proves to be successful, imagine the positive reforms that could happen with the MTA. It would be a better service, more attentive to its customers' needs, more efficient, and creating thousands of good-paying union jobs in the process. It's a win-win. So I thank you for your consideration of our position on this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Delegate Lehman.
Chair, and I actually have a question for Chair Corman. So with this bill, would you hope that one of the benefits could be greater Mark rider engagement and I guess greater public awareness of Mark service and what I remember seems like not too long ago, the promise or the goal of Mark weekend service.
Right. So part of the challenge they're having with Mark weekend service is it requires agreements with Amtrak or CSX. And some lines do run partial weekend service, by the way. But often that requires some kind of investment that the landlord railroads don't want to give up slots without some kind of investment because they have to move their own trains, right? Whether they're freight trains or Amtrak passenger trains, they need to move their own trains. And so that investment is where the problem comes in because obviously we have a lot of competing demands. And as a result, I find that the Mark system is often what's first on the chopping block. So I'm hoping that having an authority or some other kind of office that can sort of stand on its own and be in those meetings, they can sort of advocate a little bit more for the system. And also, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of an advertising problem also. I mean, when you say Maryland Transit Administration to people, it actually goes to the Baltimore problem too. I don't think people in Baltimore understand that that's their local transit service, right? When they hear Maryland Transit Administration, that can be Ocean City, that can be Bethesda, right? They don't hear Baltimore when that's said. So I think the marketing, the branding is part of it. And I also think, frankly, the ability to fight for scarce resources is part of it. And if we do the authority model, which again, I'm very open to other models, the authority could have the ability in the future to do some of its own financing, which would allow dollars to stretch a little further and maybe allow them to do some investment projects that we can't really afford under the current structure that we have.
Great, thank you, and I applaud your effort. This is the only form of mass transit I have in my district, and so I really appreciate it. And like Delegate Healy, I used to commute on Mark, so thank you for your efforts.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call up informational testimony from John Laria.
You got it.
Good to see you, John.
to you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. John Laria, I'm the chairman of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, which was created by the General Assembly in 2023 to provide oversight and advocacy for the Baltimore Regional Transit System, of course, operated by MTA, and to ensure diverse stakeholder perspectives. The question of the viability of transit authorities has been around now for some time, at least the last several years, including in a work group that the Baltimore Metropolitan Council created in 2022 that actually was named Transit Funding and Governance Work Group, and in the charge of the elusive Train Commission, which the chair mentioned earlier. The BRTC decided to advance this discussion a bit by commissioning a study focused on Baltimore Regional Transit, but hopefully that would teach us all some lessons and give some insight in that study, which I have a copy of here and which is linked in my written testimony. Certainly we can get you copies if you want. Is called Alternative Transit Governance and Funding Structures for the Baltimore Region. It was completed in January. And as the chair said, the topic is important to us because of MTA's unusual, perhaps unique nature among American transit entities. It has, as you know, no budget or operating independence, no governing board, and although we have a statutory charge to provide some oversight and such, we don't have any real power to direct it, no power over its budget or its operations. So the study recommended, suggested, and identified 3 different structures, which I could talk to you about, but not in 26 seconds. But I think that's sort of the point. We need to take a step back and look at this overall. The bill, of course, would take Mark out, but respectfully, I think that's a bit premature. This discussion is critically important. I've had it offline with the chair, who's doing an excellent job pressing these issues. I would suggest that we all take a step back, that we spend the next year in a very specific way doing what the Train Commission was empowered to do, which is to report back. And in the next session, I would be thrilled if we could have some legislative action on these structure questions. I'm frankly just concerned that doing it right now with the information in hand, only with respect to Mark, might be jumping the proverbial gun. So thank you very much. I do look forward to participating, and this is a terrific and important conversation for us to keep having.
Thank you, Mr. Laria. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Laria? Okay. Seeing none, that ends the hearing for HB 517. You can have back your chair.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice. We will call up House Bill 69, Delegate Terrassa, Environment, Plastic Products, Post-Consumer, Recycled Content Program. And if you have a panel, please bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one person on my panel for this bill. We just have one person of us, right? I don't know which one to what. Just one. All right. Good afternoon, colleagues. Can I start? I'm sorry, I didn't even look up to see that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone, and I'm what stands between you and your weekend, so be patient. We have 2 bills, and this is the shorter of the 2, but Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce and esteemed members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jen Terrassa. Thank you for this opportunity to present House Bill 69, which establishes the Post-Consumer Recycled Content Program for plastics in Maryland. It's a reintroduction of a bill from last year. This legislation seeks to reduce the demand for virgin plastic, create a market for post-consumer recycled material, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, divert waste from landfills, incinerators, and save energy. This is a companion bill to the next one you're going to hear. This one creates the demand. I'm sorry, this one creates the demand, and the other one will create the supply. So what problem are we trying to solve? As this committee knows, plastic recycling is failing. In fact, estimates are that only somewhere between 8 and 12% of plastic is recycled. I think 12% is probably optimistic. Approximately 40% of post-consumer plastic goes into the landfill, 25% is incinerated, and 19% is disposed of in unmanageable dumps and otherwise makes its way into the environment. The problem is one of collection, which we hopefully will be addressing in my bottle deposit bill, which comes next, and also one of being able to use or having a market for what's collected. So as you can see from the preamble to the bill, I'm sure you've all read that, the intent of the bill is to increase and create a stable demand for this recycled plastic. I think that's part of the most important thing here. Strengthen the recycled commodity values, increase economic value, create jobs, create incentives for producers to redesign their products, and to promote development of a market for recycled materials. And also to protect the environment and conserve resources by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption associated with extraction of fossil fuels. Also, a major piece of it is diverting waste from landfills and incinerators. So here's the details. House Bill 69 establishes a post-consumer recycled content program to be administered by MDE and requires producers of certain plastic products that are sold, offered for sale, or distributed in the state to meet minimum post-consumer recycled content requirements, to register with the department, and to pay annual registration fees that covers the cost of the program. The bill has oversight and accountability. The bill gives MDE oversight authority, including the ability to conduct audits and investigate for compliance, provides for an evaluation of the program 5 years after its inception, and producers may face a penalty if the minimum percentages are not met. The different types of products will have to meet different progressively higher goals over the next 9 years. The targeted percentages are in line with 5 other states that are doing this and the European Union that have enacted these types of legislation. Plus, the percentages are similar to the stated goals of several multinational corporations. But as you can see from the chart in my written testimony, some are doing better than others, and others have backed off of these goals. House Bill 69 will help. And please note the program is self-funding with a dedicated fund. So this is my 4th year working on this legislation, and we made quite a few improvements over the years to make it better. This year, at the request of the retailers, we've addressed a concern about private labels, plus we've addressed some concerns expressed by the Association of Plastic Recyclers, including moving out dates for achievement of recycled content of rigid plastic food containers by 1 year. Conclusion, that's my conclusion. Here we go. We are, just about done, we are in a plastic pollution crisis. If we truly want to address the challenges of recycling plastic, consumers can't do it alone. We aren't stupid or lazy, and we don't need to be just to be more educated. We need producers to do their part, and we cannot delay any further. I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 69. Thanks. Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm Martha Ainsworth. I'm chair of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club Zero Waste Team, speaking in support of HB 69 on behalf of the 70,000 members and supporters of the Sierra Club in the state. This bill will stimulate recycling markets, reduce plastic waste and greenhouse gases, and provide an incentive for product redesign for recyclability. It will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by increasing the recycled content of plastic products, reducing the use and production of virgin plastic, and that generates greenhouse gas emissions at every stage of the life cycle. Multinational corporations have set voluntary recycled content targets for plastic packaging, but voluntary targets are not enough. A recycled content mandate will affect all producers and create a steady demand for recycled plastic that replaces cheaper virgin plastic. It would reduce plastic waste and create incentives to redesign products for recyclability, which can result in greater supply of post-consumer plastic. 5 states have already passed mandatory plastic post-consumer recycled content laws: California, Connecticut, Maine, New Jersey, and Washington State. So in 2021, the General Assembly adopted a recycling market development law. Recycled content mandates are a major policy tool for developing recycling markets. The targets and timelines in HB 69 are consistent with those in other states. They're ambitious, but they're feasible. Or they're not infeasible, they're feasible. The bill has benefited from consultations with government agencies in 2 of the states that have adopted similar laws, and it's been amended to address testimony submitted in 2024. According to the fiscal note, it pays for itself, and it's, if you act now, the first recycled content targets would be met in January 2027. There's no reason to wait. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Terrassa, for continuing to work on this important issue. I believe you said you had amendments that addressed concerns of the retailers, and what was the other one?
So, sorry, to clarify, it was the Association of Plastic Manufacturers. They're not amendments, they're things that we've changed this year in the bill. So we don't have any amendments as of yet, just changes that we made in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, thank you. We have an in-person favorable amendment. Chaz Miller, Maryland Recycling Network, if he's here. Chaz Miller. Okay, we have a virtual favorable amendment. Allison Kustik, Association of Plastic Recyclers. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. I'm Allison Kustik, State Government Relations Manager for the Association of Plastic Recyclers, or APR, and I'm here in a favorable with amendments position on House Bill 69. APR members are the companies that recycle more than 5 billion pounds of plastic packaging each year, including the plastic bottles, milk jugs, yogurt containers, and other plastics items collected from Maryland households. And our goal is simple. We want to recycle more plastic to reduce waste, stimulate local economies, and strengthen domestic manufacturing. And House Bill 69 is a key part of that solution by requiring companies to use more recycled plastics and develop more circular markets. APR is a strong proponent of recycled content policies and has advocated for similar bills across the country for nearly 2 decades. Recycling has environmental benefits, but it is first and foremost a business. Plastics recyclers compete to sell recycled content against virgin plastic material, so state policy has an important role to play in shifting the market in favor of a cleaner, healthier, circular economy through the use of more recycled materials. We have learned that the most effective recycled content policies are ones that are implemented alongside policies that also collect more plastics for recycling. So that's why we're also supporting bottle deposits and extended producer responsibility, or EPR programs. House Bill 69 drives demand for recycled material through its recycled content targets, but without strong collection systems, recyclers won't have the necessary materials to supply manufacturers with recycled content for their products. So Maryland is also considering House Bill 232, which we'll hear in a minute, a bottle deposit bill, and Senate Bill 901, an EPR for packaging bill, and passing policies like this in tandem with House Bill 69 or amending them to be integrated with one another will create the most robust recycling system for this state. We're grateful for Delegate Trost's leadership on the issue, and we're grateful for the opportunity to speak in favor today and also provide some amendments in our written testimony. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Delegate Stein.
Chair, I certainly understand the point, and I think the sponsor made a similar point that it's important to have the material if you're going to be in creating these post-consumer recycling content standards. That it's important to have basically the feedstock, to meet these goals. Is it necessary to have a bottle bill or a PCR bill in order to pass post-consumer recycling content requirements?
We've certainly seen them passed independent of each other. APR, I mean, that is the main reason that we're favorable with amendments today, is we would like to see them go together. We've seen instances where EPR bills will just provide language that sort of allows for them to work with separate bills for recycled content mandates like this one. So our position is really we would like to see them go together, preferably in the same vehicle, but it does work best if it leaves at least like language for them to go together and passed at similar times and have similar timelines for implementation, because it can create issues when you have mandates to get it without the feedstock, or vice versa. You're collecting a lot of material but no mandates to put that anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, I think Mr. Miller did arrive while we were on favorable with amendment, so let me call him up. Maryland Recycling Network. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Chaz Miller. I chair the Maryland Recycling Network's Legislative Task Force. Our members are county and municipal government recycling managers, composters, and private sector recyclers. We collect and process in Maryland's municipal recyclables. We need robust recycling markets to succeed. We support HB 69 with suggested changes or ideas for changes, concepts, not plans. And we thank Delegate Terrassa for introducing the bill. Recycled content send a message to product and packaging manufacturers to support recycling by using recycled materials in their products. It establishes very challenging goals. Some may not be achievable because they fail to take into account realistic recovery rates along with product loss during collection, processing, and remanufacturing. In addition, recycled plastics often have markets who make products not covered by this law. The colors in the HDPE resin used in bottles for personal care and household cleaning products cannot be taken out when the bottles are recycled, which is why the products for that are mostly piping, using water piping or sewage piping or what have you. The same with PET bottles. They can be used for fiber and all kinds of other products. We think competitive markets are very good, and they have to be recognized because if those people pay more for that as an end product, you're not going to be able to meet a recycling content goal for the bottles. We think our goal should be to increase recycling markets, not just to shift around who buys them. We want more markets for everything. But we also think, Maryland passed in the 90s one of the first recycled content laws in the country. In that case, it was for newspapers. Maryland was a leader when it came to recycled content 30 years ago. And I think Maryland can be a leader again. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I do not see any questions. All right, so we'll move on to the unfavorable. We have Sarah Price for the Maryland Retailers Alliance, Andrew Hackman for Ameripen, Daniel Funitato for the Plastics Industry Association, and Carl Livesay for Mercy Plastics. Please go ahead when one of you is sitting and ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honorable committee members. Sarah Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. I do appreciate changes that were made to address some of our previous concerns, but unfortunately our position is not neutralized. Our concerns are first and foremost that we don't think that the legislature should be considering heavy packaging and recycling proposals without the opportunity to review the recycling needs assessment, which you do not have yet. On the bill, the third-party certification requirement is a problem as the supplier of packaging is typically getting PCR content third-party certified, not the brand owner. So there should be an option for the producer to self-certify using supplier documentation. We also received feedback regarding the fee structure such that multi-material products that may have a small bit of plastic should not be treated the same fee-wise as large plastic containers. That fees should be set proportionally to the amount of virgin plastic sold into the state, not total plastic if it does include recycled content, and that the fee should be primarily on virgin plastic to provide an incentive for companies to use more of the PCR content and hit the goals faster or even exceed them. Additionally, there are some concerns about the use of PCR materials in food and other chemical packaging. The FDA has strict standards for packaging composition of food safety, and the EPA has additional regulations for certain chemical packaging and does not allow states to deviate from that. And this proposal does not appear to address or exempt packaging for those considerations. Other exemptions that are in the bill for caps and closures and compostable materials appear to apply just to beverage containers, and we believe that they should apply to household cleaning and personal care products as well. But ultimately, we still feel that this policy is inappropriate for the state level and would urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Andy Hackman here on behalf of Ameripen. We are the national organization that represents the entire packaging supply chain. That's from folks that make plastic bags, cardboard boxes, glass cans, metal cans, the entire packaging supply chain, those brands that use that in their consumer goods, from cereal makers to cleaning product makers to food makers, and some folks that do waste management in the state. We appreciate the work that's gone into this legislation to try to look at consistency with other states, but we want to note that it's still significantly different from other states that have acted in the area of recycled content. In particular, I want to highlight the food contact category of products that would be required to include up to 40% recycled content. We've had very explicit feedback from our membership that particularly in food contact applications, those resins have to be certified by the FDA so that they come in contact with food and won't contaminate that food. And you don't want an oil container being recycled into a salad container. So from a contamination standpoint, there's incredible concern with the application of that high of a standard for that product category. Other states like New Jersey, Washington State have not included a food contact category or have provided very explicit exemptions for food contact for a significant period of time. In terms of other structural differences between legislation here before you and legislation in states like New Jersey and Washington State are the definition of producer, the waiver process, and other structural elements of defining actually what is a rigid plastic packaging container. So we encourage the committee, if it's going to consider moving forward, we need 100% consistency with those other states and really need to look at the food contact category. Also, the effective date of January 1, 2027 is the same effective date that was in this legislation last year. So effectively, we have moved the effective date ahead 1 year by continuing to consider that date. And we ask for, at least for now, an unfavorable report on House Bill 69.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Danielle Fortunato. I'm representing the Plastics Industry Association today. We are the national trade association who represents the entirety of the plastic supply chain, from the resin and material suppliers to the producers and converters of the packaging products, the equipment manufacturers and recyclers, and a couple other little facets all in between that. I am here, unfortunately, in opposition to this legislation for many of the reasons that the two former panelists mentioned, so I won't get into too much detail, but I did want to drive home one major concern, which is the food packaging content. Again, as was mentioned, the USDA and FDA already heavily regulate food packaging, food contact packaging, by putting forth recycled content mandates with numbers that are not chosen through means of a needs assessment or with any research done beforehand is very concerning for us. As Andy said, you don't want an oil container being turned into your salad container, your spinach container, or your yogurt container. So we would urge the committee to reconsider the inclusion of the food contact part of this legislation, and also to, if they do move forward with it, to please consider exemptions and not just temporary waivers. I will second the concern about the definition of producer, as it's currently just defined as a person responsible for complying with the law. But if you go further down the bill, there is Section 92703 5B, which outlines hierarchy of responsibility to the brand owner, then the manufacturer, then the importer. And we would just ask that you would make that the sole definition of producer to make it a little less confusing. And with that, I will yield back my 10 seconds. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Ivesay, and I'm the general manager at Mercury Plastics. Mercury Plastics is a small thermoform plastic manufacturer located in South Baltimore. We're a Maryland corporation that began operations November 13, 2020, by acquiring the assets of Maryland Thermoform. Every job at Maryland Thermoform was retained in this transition. Today, we operate as a lean manufacturer with just under 50 employees. At Mercury Plastics, sustainability is a core value. We recycle all materials, including plastics, wood, paper, corrugated steel, and aluminum, even capturing the heat generated by our equipment. And approximately 35% of our electricity comes from rooftop solar panels. No plastic from our facility ends up in any Maryland landfill. Concerns regarding the bill: while we support the intent of HB 069, several aspects of the bill present significant challenges for Maryland manufacturers. These concerns primarily stem from the issues with post-consumer recycling plastic, the supply chain, including limited recycling infrastructure. PCR recycling facilities have not kept pace with the industry demand. The process is expensive, slow, and labor-intensive, with recyclers hesitant to invest in necessary equipment and labor. Insufficient sorting process. Single-stream consumer recycling is a disadvantage. All plastics are commingled with glass, metals, paper, different types of plastic, along with anything else that consumers think might be recyclable. This is convenient for the consumer, and for collecting, but these different materials must all be separated discreetly and manually at the landfill or material recovery facility, a difficult and very inefficient process. Scarcity and cost of PCR material, 30% more for PCR than industrial recycle. We are not opposed to industrial recycle. About 99% of our product is recycled, just not PCR.
Great, thank you very much. And I should have noted we have a colleague from Economic Matters here because it's a dual referred bill. Any questions for this panel? Okay. I think we might have one more. Sorry, I might have jumped ahead of myself. Yeah, we have a virtual unfair witness, Jamie Logan from the American Cleaning Institute.
I apologize. The camera's giving me an error code. Are you all right if I go?
That's okay. We can hear you, so just go ahead with your testimony.
I appreciate it, Chairman. Thank you. Chairman, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 69. I'm Jamie Logan with the American Cleaning Institute, the national trade association representing the $60 billion cleaning product industry. We know that the legislature has heard many packaging proposals in recent years, and ACI was happy to be noted as favorable with amendments on House Bill 284 from 2022, which established an EPR needs assessment, and we're excited to see the recommendations that come from this study. We therefore are opposed to House Bill 69 today and do not believe that additional policies should be passed until we understand the entire recycling landscape in Maryland, which the needs assessment will do. So a few considerations on House Bill 69 are that these rates go beyond what our industry has been able to commit to. We're concerned that the PCR rate increases will occur automatically without justification from national recycling trends. Additionally, it's difficult to report state-specific data on this sort. The nature of today's supply chain means producers often do not have control where their products are ultimately sold, so compliance of this sort needs to be based on national sales data and be prorated for Maryland's population. Additionally, third-party certification in this bill would be problematic, as these third-party certifiers may be inundated with requests due to new national requirements that are being implemented, so it should be sufficient for companies to self-certify and maintain documentation needed to demonstrate to the department that the required recycled content has been incorporated. I'd also like to reemphasize a point made earlier about exemptions for various covered products being inconsistent, specifically with caps, closures, and labels being omitted from recycled content provisions in plastic beverage containers, but not for other rigid plastic containers for household cleaning or personal care products. So for those reasons, ACI is opposed to this bill today, but we'd like to continue to engage with the legislator about how to improve the performance of the recycling system in Maryland and providing necessary input regarding the performance of our products and packaging to achieve the desired policy goals. So I appreciate it and appreciate bearing the technical difficulties. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Seeing no questions, that concludes the bill here on House Bill 69. We'll now turn to House Bill 232, Delegate Terrassa, Maryland Beverage Container Recycling Refund and Litter Reduction Program. And if you have an in-person panel, please bring them up with you.
Do you have a panel? Those who know they're on the panel come up. I'll call you up in a second if you don't.
I think it's Christopher Williams, Lahan Cephas, Martha Ainsworth, and Carlos Sanchez in terms of folks who are here in person. Oh, no, Carlos Sanchez is also virtual. I apologize.
I think we have several that are virtual, and I think Chris Williams is not here.
Chris Williams, yeah. But
So we want to add Adam Lindquist instead. Okay. Should I begin? All right, good afternoon, folks. This is the last one, but please be patient. It's a big one, and we have a lot of witnesses. My apologies are ahead of time. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of this esteemed committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jen Terrassa. Thank you for this opportunity to present House Bill 232, which establishes the Beverage Container Recycling Refund and Litter Reduction Program, otherwise known as the Maryland Bottle Bill, which requires collection of a small refundable deposit of 10 or 15 cents when a beverage is sold, and the deposit is refunded to the consumer when the can or bottle is returned. It's cross-filed by Senator Brooks in Senate Bill 346. So this is a reintroduction of House Bill 735 from last year. This is only the third year on this bill, but other legislators have tried multiple times over the years to make Maryland a bottle bill state. And I truly believe we've come up with the best version yet here. We have continued to meet with stakeholders to better understand their concerns and have made a number of changes based on feedback we received. We did our best to address those concerns, and while still making sure that the program would work as intended. So here's the problem. And you'll probably see that on your screen, and you're probably familiar with it. As of 2021, 5.5 billion, yes, billion, beverage containers are sold annually in Maryland. And believe it or not, that's 890 per person each year. Unfortunately, only about a quarter of those, 1.4 billion, are recycled. That means more than 4 billion end up in landfills, incinerators, and littering our environment. In fact, single-use beverage containers are one of the most common items littered across the state. They account for more than half of the litter and the trash traps on the Anacostia River, and most of these are wasted containers made of plastic. They are polluting our waterways and posing a risk to wildlife and our health. They break into tiny pieces, are ingested by marine life, causing sickness and death, and the small plastic particles are also in our food and our bodies. In fact, we know Maryland's beverage container litter problem is so severe that our state, home to the largest estuary in the country, also has the dubious distinction of having two of the 3 water bodies in the country that are declared impaired for trash and regulated by the EPA under the Clean Water Act. This is a waste of energy and resources. Rather than conserving and reusing those wasted materials, new beverage containers are being manufactured from virgin materials that generate greenhouse gas emissions at every stage of the life cycle, from extraction to production and disposal, with climate, health, and environmental justice impacts. So the good news is we know what to do to dramatically increase recycling and reduce litter. Bottle bills with recycling refunds work. 10 states have deposits on beverage containers. They're listed in my testimony. I'm happy if you have questions to answer that. And they've been in operation for decades. DC is currently proposing a very similar one, and many other countries have instituted bottle deposits as well. And we know those states with bottle deposits reach between 59 and 91% recycling rates of beverage containers. House Bill 232 takes into account the lessons learned from those 10 states and what works, what doesn't, and what to avoid. So how does this work? As I said, 232 would create the beverage container deposit program. It's 10 cents for containers 24 fluid ounces or less, and 15 cents for beverage containers between 24 fluid ounces and 3 liters. Distributors of the beverage container would collect the deposit when they deliver their products to a retailer for sale. Then the retailer gets refunded for that deposit when a customer purchases the beverage, and the customer gets their deposit refunded when they return the container for recycling. Think of it as buying the beverage but borrowing the container. The deposit ensures that the empty containers return not trashed or littered. Remember, our goal is to get the bottles back. Restaurants, bars, hotels, and large venues where customers consume beverages on premises will obtain a refund when the empty containers are picked up by the stewardship organization that runs the program. So this will be implemented by beverage producers as part of a nonprofit beverage container stewardship organization, which all beverage producers selling or distributing in Maryland will belong to. There's oversight from MDE. MDE will set a convenience standards, handling fees, producer registration fees. They approve the stewardship organization and each 5-year stewardship plan and annual reports. MDE will enforce compliance with the program and may conduct audits as well. And they also will have an advisory council of stakeholders. The program is self-financed by registration and producer fees, sale of the raw materials, unredeemed deposits, and penalties. The program goes into effect January 1st, 2028, giving everyone plenty of time, 2.5 years, to launch it. I do want to address how local governments are affected. It should reduce costs for counties and municipalities. They will not have to pay for collecting, transporting, or tipping fees for 3/4 of the beverage containers that are currently trashed or burned. I've heard that they'll still have to do the same number of collections. They may have to do the same number of trash or recycling runs, but it should cut down significantly on what's collected and the tipping fees associated. Diversion of glass from curbside programs will also save collection costs for the material that is single stream system. And if you don't know, glass bottles are costly for the counties. They create wear and tear on the machinery, and the counties essentially have to pay to get rid of them. For the first 2 years of the program, there will be a compensation to the counties for net losses. Local governments are not involved in implementation or enforcement of the program, but they do have the option to set up their own redemption facilities and receive a handling fee per container under the program. So what's different from last year? Startup costs, or since we started this, startup costs charged to the general fund will be totally reimbursed retroactively in the first year program registration fee. The program will be administered by a single beverage container organization instead of multiple to make it simpler for MDE. And I want to address restaurants and hospitality industry. The stewardship organization is responsible for financing any receptacles in which the empty containers will be placed or picking them up and transporting them. Restaurants will receive a small per container materials handling fee for collecting and preliminary sorting. And restaurants should be able to reduce cost that they pay now for trash and recycling pickup. During the hearing for my post-consumer recycled content that we just heard, we heard from opposition that they're worried that there won't be high-quality material to meet the requirement, and this bill is the answer to that. Beverage container litter is a major contributor to the plastic pollution crisis that is impacting both the environment and our health. We know it works to solve the problem based on decades of experience. This doesn't require additional information. We need to spark a change in behavior. Every year we wait, 4 billion more beverage containers are entering our environment. We need to stop kicking the can down the road and pass the Maryland bottle bill now. I respectfully urge a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. And I don't know about you, but I was shocked to learn that only a quarter of the beverage containers sold in Maryland are ever recycled. I thought we were a state that recycled. How can that be true with 4 billion beverage containers ending up as litter, buried, or burned? How can we say that Maryland recycles when that's true? My name is Adam Lindquist. I'm the Vice President of the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore. We are a nonprofit and business improvement district in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. So I represent the businesses all around the waterfront, and they have sent me here today in support of this legislation because our organization spends literally millions of dollars every year cleaning the waterfront, cleaning trash from the water, cleaning trash from the land. And we don't have to spend that money cleaning up litter. We could be building new parks. We could be investing more money in the promenade of the Inner Harbor, making the Inner Harbor a beautiful tourist destination that is great for the businesses of Baltimore City. But instead, we had to get creative, and we did invent Mr. Trash Wheel, if you're familiar with our googly-eyed giant trash interceptor. It's been on some of the pictures today, to pick up trash flowing into the Baltimore Harbor. And so over the last 11 years, we've picked up almost 2 million plastic bottles and beverage containers from that one waterway. We pick up about 200,000 bottles a year, or on average about 500 bottles every single day, just from the streams in Baltimore City. You might have heard that last June, we actually had the first ever public swim event in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. I jumped in 7 times. I'm here today to tell you about it. So it went really well. And it's thanks to technology like Mr. Trash Wheel, and thanks to bans like the statewide bill that banned foam containers, which have reduced the amount of foam containers ending up in the Baltimore Harbor by 85%. This bill would do the same thing for beverage containers. So I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and committee members. Martha Ainsworth with the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club Zero Waste team. speaking in strong support of HB 232 on behalf of the chapter's members and supporters. This is a priority bill for the Sierra Club and 2 dozen other organizations and our Maryland Bottle Bill Coalition. The bill would reduce beverage container litter and plastic pollution as much as 85%. That is its objective. It will also remove 3.6 billion containers per year from landfills, incinerators, and the environment, more than tripling Maryland's beverage container recycling rate to 90%. There's no other program that can achieve this impact because you can't recycle what you can't collect. When there's a deposit value attached to an empty beverage container, you get it back. The recycling needs assessment for the EPR for packaging bill will soon be available, but it will not address beverage container litter and plastic pollution in our waterways. Expanding curbside recycling is not the answer. The littered containers are from beverages consumed away from home. The bottle bill would not fundamentally change our recycling system. Beverage containers are a small percentage of the waste stream. In all 10 bottle bill states, deposits and curbside collection coexist. Bottle bills are complementary with other packaging bills. 3 of the 5 states with EPR for packaging laws have deposit programs. We need both a bottle bill and an EPR for packaging bill. And bottle bills are politically popular. More than 90% of registered voters in Maryland would support a program with a 10-cent refundable deposit program paid for by producers, not taxpayers. To sum it up, we have an enormous litter problem. There's a highly effective program to fix it. The producers are responsible for fixing it, and the public overwhelmingly supports it. So now's the time to act. Why are we waiting on this bill? With your help, we can do this. Don't waste another 4 billion beverage containers this year. We respectfully request a favorable report on the Maryland Bottle Bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Grayson Green. I'm a sophomore at Annapolis High School, and I'm the president and founder of the Annapolis High School Surfrider Student Club. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The Surfrider Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the protection of our oceans, beaches, and waves, and we work to ensure that there is clean water and access for all people. In Maryland, we have 7 volunteer-led grassroots chapters and clubs spread across the state. Nationally, we are part of a network of 50,000 volunteers and 1 million supporters. Last week, I and 30 other Surfrider volunteers had the opportunity to meet with many of you in your offices to talk about the importance of the HB 232 bottle bill. One of the Surfrider Foundation's main focus areas is reducing plastic pollution. My Surfrider Student Club leads beach and shoreline cleanups, and we find that bottle waste, particularly plastic bottles, are some of the most collected trash that we find during these cleanups. One of the areas that we focus our cleanup work is the Masonville Cove Education Center, the country's first urban wildlife refuge, an area just south of the Baltimore Harbor. The shore at Masonville Cove is almost entirely covered with small pieces of plastic, so much that you cannot see the ground underneath. And on top of that, you find hundreds of plastic bottles. We could probably clean that beach every day for a month before we saw a noticeable difference in the amount of litter. And sure, we could try to do that, but that isn't a long-term or permanent solution. We need to stop the plastic bottle pollution problem at its source and create an incentive not to litter. And we now know what happens with all of this litter. It ends up inside of our bodies through our food and drinking water. As others have testified today, the issue of plastic litter has become a serious human health emergency for all Marylanders. In short, we need the bottle bill to change the system and to stop the cycle of plastic bottle pollution. Other states have shown for decades that the bottle bills are successful to increase recycling rates and decrease litter. This is not some new, unproven idea, and we want for all people and students of Maryland to have access to clean, unpolluted, plastic-free water. So we ask that you please take this important step and pass the Maryland Bottle Bill. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great, thank you, Delegate. I know you have some virtual witnesses, but can we do the questions with the folks who are live here?
Sure.
Great. Delegate Ziegler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the last bill hearing, I think it was the Maryland Beverage Association referenced a recycling needs assessment and wondered why we wouldn't wait until we have that. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
Okay, I'm going to address that, and then if somebody else has anything to add to that. Thank you for that question. I want to point out that that was passed 2 years ago, and the report was due in mid-2024. We don't have that yet. We expect it soon, but soon we'll see. I don't think it's out yet, no. We're still waiting. But let's keep in mind that 4 billion more containers. Each year we wait $4 billion more beverage containers are in our environment. We also know from the RFP for the assessment and also from conversations with the MDE that the needs assessment won't be analyzing litter issues, nor will it address the reduce, reuse aspects of reduce, reuse, recycle. So we don't need a study to show us that we have a plastic pollution and litter crisis. We know that piece of it, and we have a proven and effective solution. And the other thing I would just want to point out is that the focus of the extended producer responsibility program that we set up the study for is to reduce packaging, redesign packaging, and reduce toxins in packaging. This bill is focused on beverage containers, reducing litter and plastic, and increasing the quality. That's a big piece of the quality of the recycled material. So that's much more likely to be reused as post-consumer recycled content instead of going back into the environment, really closing that recycling loop. I think that's
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to first walk through quickly, if I understand correctly, how this works. So there would be a stewardship organization, and the manufacturers would pay a registration fee. Is that correct? And then, go ahead.
Okay, let me see if I can get close enough to the mic. So the program would be run and financed by a stewardship organization of all producers selling beverages in glass, metal, and plastic containers in the state, less than 3 liters. They would be responsible for implementing the program with strong oversight from MDE. The program pays for itself. What was did I miss any part of the question?
I think she had. So then there would be retailers would be required to accept, or large retailers would be required to accept the bottles, either drop off, or they would have a machine that people can put the bottles in. Is that correct?
Right. The success of the program depends on really 2 things. The first is the right level of deposit to be an incentive to come back.
I understand. I'm just trying to.
The second one is the convenience.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to understand how it works, like very simply how it works.
I'm trying to explain. Return to retail.
Okay. So, but it doesn't, it goes to, they don't have to have. So basically, the stewardship organization is going to really work on how that'll work. Instead of having to return it to every store, there will be, we're going to have these, what do you call this, recycling, the return stations.
Oh, the redemption centers.
The redemption centers. So you don't have to go back, for example, in some states, you have to go back to the place that you purchased that. You don't have to do that in this. You just need to return it in Maryland.
Okay, thank you. And so wouldn't there be some burden on the retailers to have space for the return?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. So I've talked to retailers. I know the retailers, the Restaurant Association, I think the retailers came out opposed. But my understanding is this is the same volume of trash that they would have otherwise, right? That's the same volume. They don't have to have a redemption center unless they're like a very large one. Do the large folks?
It's so that, oh, sorry.
Hey, grab that one.
Okay, let me grab this one. We've exempted retailers with less than 3,000 square feet of sales area from having to take anything back, unless it's like those little tiny miniature alcohol things that don't go into a reverse vending machine, and if they sell them. But it's hard to argue you don't have space for those little guys. There's going to be a convenience standard. One of MDE's responsibilities to set up a convenience standard. The idea is return to retail makes it very convenient. That's another aspect of the success of the program. But not every single retailer is going to have that. They can combine forces and have a single bank of reverse vending machines. They have something called a bag drop now, which is even more convenient, and they're in the parking lot. The retailers like that because it's redemption outside the store. You can put all your beverage containers in one bag and get a personal account with a sticker, personal sticker, and just put it in this chute, and the money is deposited in your account. You're not even having to go into the store. But some stores like having you go into the store because then you go and buy something, you get your receipt and you buy something. So
Right, so the bottom line is the small retailers won't have to have them, and the larger retailers, there's going to be a convenience standard set up by MDE, and then the stewardship organization will really work on how to make that happen in a way that works for the businesses.
Thank you. And I notice in your testimony, it says retailers and hospitality businesses would receive a handling fee per container to pay for the cost of collection, sorting, and storing. So they would have some, they're not bearing the full cost of doing that.
They shouldn't be bearing the cost, right?
Thank you.
in fact, MDE is supposed to calculate those handling fees based on the actual cost. And it's very important that it's MDE and not the producers who could kind of stiff the retailers, which has happened in other places. So you've thought through that one.
Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this important bill, and to your panel. My question, as someone who jumped into the harbor last June and also survived, it was so fun. It was so fun. I was only itchy for a couple days after. But I have a question about the effectiveness of plastic recycling. And I think we've all heard stories about how the petroleum industry has sort of been less than honest about the effectiveness of plastic recycling. And a lot of us who've been diligent recyclers for decades felt really bad about that. So we set up the bottle bill program. Folks get excited again and restore their faith in the value of recycling. But what really happens to the plastic? Are we tackling that?
So we are tackling that, and there may be others that want to add to that, but we are tackling that in the sense that part of our problem, and I hate to say this to all of us who celebrated that single stream recycling, but single stream recycling gets a lot more people to recycle, but it doesn't make the material as recyclable as if you had them all separated out. So what happens with this is it separates out the material. You get a much cleaner feed, and that should be more usable. It will be more usable in the end. And then if the other bill passes with this, it creates a market for that.
Great, thank you. And thanks again, Waterfront Partnership, for your great work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Terraza, for your efforts on this legislation. And thank you to your panel. I hope Maryland will become the 11th state
Delegate Lehman, I hate to say this, but I'm having trouble hearing you.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. Delegate Foley frequently tells me I don't lean in close enough. I'm sorry for that. Thank you for the bill. Thank you to your wonderful panel. And I said I certainly hope Maryland will become the 11th. I think you said 10 states do this. I hope we'll become the 11th state to allow folks to redeem and return bottles and cans. So I have two questions. One is about the system for redeeming, and the other is about the refunds. So I am not familiar with, unless it's like a new idea on the bags, if either Delegate Terraza or Martha Ainsworth can describe that a little further. My daughter lives in New York City, where you see what look like vending machines like all over on public streets, where people just stand there and feed their bottles and cans into these machines and presumably get money back right on the spot. So you're talking about a bag return system, possibly these type of vending machines. And then the second part of that is on page 10, where it talks about the actual refund. It talks about 3 different scenarios of a refund or a voucher for a refund or a credit to an account for the refund. So could you expound on those things a little bit?
So I'll let Ms. Ainsworth speak to those, because I think she's done a lot of research, but those are all different types of systems that have been used, and the stewardship organization can work on how that would work. But if you can tell her just really briefly, since they all want to get home.
Okay, we all want to get home. So those are reverse vending machines that you're talking about, and you can feed things in one at a time. You would get you get a little receipt coming out of, like a script that comes out of it and tells you how much you're owed, and you can just go to the checkout at the retailer and get the money back. And one of the most important principles, and we try to adhere to, is that if you need your money back right now, that you can get it back right now. But these other programs, they're called the bag drops, are very convenient. You're not standing in line waiting to put them in one at a time. You can put them all in one bag, put your personal barcode on it, stick it in this hatch in the trailer in the parking lot, and then 2 days later you have all that money in your account. You can just take it out. And there's a little kiosk in the store where you can get another slip that tells how much you're owed. So there's been quite a bit of change in the technology. It's not some person in the back of the store with a big storeroom and empty bottles. It's not like that anymore. You were asking about something else.
Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. And those different scenarios could be tied to either a refund right on the spot or a voucher or a credit to an account, whatever system that is.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Morgan, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Terraza. Showing my age, I remember we had bottles when you got 2 cents and 5 cents. Then the Graduate movie came along and Dustin Hoffman learned about plastics.
Right.
So, and the kids, the little ones don't remember that one. That's okay. I go to a bar. I want to drink a beer. And you have a 10-cent deposit on a bottle. Are the bartenders supposed to sit there with dimes to pay you back? Or
No. So when you go to a restaurant, good question. And yes, the plastics are everywhere now. But when you go to a restaurant, they will not charge you the 10 cents. They have paid the 10 cents, and they get it back when they collect your bottles and they return those bottles. So no, they will not be sitting there handing 10 cents. You won't be handing them 10 cents, and they won't be handing them to you either.
Okay, so let's use, we discussed in here Ocean City the other day, and Ocean City apparently doesn't have recycling. So from Memorial Day to Labor Day, they get pretty busy, and the bars are full. How are they going to accommodate this bill with all the bottles and cans that are going to be going through their system?
Well, the bottles and cans are going through their system anyway, whether they're recycling them or not. Right, that same volume, you're taking back the same bottles that you would have been putting in the trash. Instead, you're just going to put them in a container next to there, and the stewardship organization will work out how frequently they'll pick those up, or whether the restaurants can drop them off at a redemption center. That's for the stewardship organization to work out. But it's the same volume, right? They have all of those cans, and if they're not recycling, this will start recycling there. And they probably, I don't know how it works in Ocean City, but in Howard County, the businesses they have to pay for their trash and recycling, and this will take all that burden of paying for that volume away from them.
Then what would you do in, say, rural counties like mine, where, we have a couple people that may recycle, but for the most part, we go to single stream?
So the stewardship organization is going to create a way to pick those up. I guess people could continue to, it doesn't matter what system you have there. I mean, the stewardship organization is going to pick these up from the redemption centers. So it's up to you whether you want to get your deposit back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Since Delegate Morgan brought it up, could we pilot this in Ocean City and help them with their recycling? Okay, we have a number of virtual witnesses in favor. We'll start with Elizabeth Risnar.
Thank you. I think the host has to turn my video on. Okay. Hi, thank you. I'm a physician, and I will highlight 3 public health benefits of the bottle bill. For more details and citations, please refer to the written testimony submitted by Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility and Healthy Climate Maryland. So first, plastic bottles that are littered or landfilled readily degrade into micro and nanoplastics, and these microplastics pollute our air, water, and soil, and they end up in our water supply and food chain. For example, because of the microplastic pollution in the Chesapeake Bay, oysters harvested from the bay contain detectable amounts of plastic. When we ingest microplastics, they can be absorbed into our bloodstream and then spread throughout our bodies. Indeed, microplastics have been detected in most human organs, including the heart, lungs, brain, and testicles. Research shows that these tiny pieces of plastic cause inflammation in our bodies, and doctors are concerned that they could be linked to higher rates of heart attacks, stroke, and cancer. Moreover, these plastics release endocrine disrupting chemicals, implicating them in obesity, type 2 diabetes, preterm birth, decreased sperm count, IQ loss, ADHD, and autism. Because the bottle bill would recover over 80 to 90% of plastic bottles, it would help reduce environmental microplastic pollution and thus human exposure. Second, plastic bottles that are trashed can end up incinerated. Unfortunately, when plastic bottles are burned, they release harmful air pollutants that worsen asthma and COPD and also increase the risk of learning and behavioral problems in children as well as dementia in adults. By keeping plastic bottles out of our trash incinerators in Baltimore City and Montgomery County, the bottle bill will help improve those communities' health. Third, any plastic bottle that is not recycled increases demand for new plastic. Plastic comes from fossil fuels, and plastic production is responsible for a rising share of global carbon emissions causing climate change, which is a huge threat to public health. I therefore ask you to vote in favor of the bottle bill. Because this program does not cost the state any money, it is a free way for the General Assembly to protect the health of all Marylanders.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Carlos Sanchez.
Hello, everyone. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carlos Sanchez, and I'm a youth leader dedicated to organizing community power for environmental justice. I work with fellow residents at the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and together we work to make development without displacement and zero waste a reality. In 2020, we helped create Baltimore's first zero waste plan, also passed by City Council, and included this bill as a top priority to help move Baltimore away from landfill and incineration. I was here last year, and it's again 2025, and we're back again, still missing this basic step forward. And for another year, I had to live with the consequences of Maryland's choice not to pass pro-zero waste bottle bill legislation every single day. I live in South Baltimore. I was born and raised in Lakeland, and I work in Curtis Bay. And for those who may not know, Curtis Bay has an overall EJ score of 100%, and the neighborhood is also in the 91st percentile for asthma emergency room discharges, 88th percentile for both low infant birth rates and for heart attack discharges. So how will this bill, informed by environmental justice communities, make a difference for me, my family, and my surrounding communities? Well, first, it will reduce toxic air pollution from burning plastics as well as greenhouse gas emissions. And secondly, it will save local governments millions of dollars in waste disposal fees that then can be invested in more zero waste solutions. And thirdly, it will create jobs. But Maryland's failure to pass this piece of legislation impacts me every day. And when I wake up in the morning in my community, I see the Bresco trash burning incinerator just about a mile away, burning tons of plastic bottles that I breathe in. And every breath that I take has toxic chemicals that we aren't even aware of. When I go to work in Curtis Bay, I walk by alleys, vacant homes filled with illegal dumping, mostly plastic bottles and glass bottles. As I connect with fellow community members, hearing about their concerns, but with families with asthma and wanting to feel proud of their communities, I can literally see trash trucks on their way to the city landfill that's also in South Baltimore, where the ashes from burning bottles go. And this is what living close to a failed waste system looks like that only knows how to burn and bury and dump feels like. And it's not safe. And it's
Thank
not
you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Peter Blair, Just Zero. Peter Blair. Yep, please go ahead.
All right, wonderful. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Blair. I'm an environmental attorney and the policy and advocacy director for Just Zero. Just Zero is a national environmental nonprofit advocacy organization. We work to implement proven and effective policies that reduce waste and benefit the environment. And I'm here supporting this bill because that's exactly what it does. Bottle programs reduce litter, increase recycling, create high-paying green jobs, all without any additional cost on consumers, communities, or the state. I'm extremely excited about this bill, not only because it would make Maryland the 11th state in the U.S. to have a bottle bill, but because the program it's going to create is one that really sets the state up for long-term success. This program is different from the 10 bottle bills that are currently operating in the U.S., and that's a good thing. While those programs have been incredibly successful, they have reduced litter, they have increased recycling rates, they're in many ways outdated. Most of them were passed in the 1970s and the 1980s, and they haven't been meaningfully updated. What Delegate Peraza has done is taken what works in those other states and added key provisions that are going to make a much more modern, efficient, convenient, and effective system. And that's because it has the key components that are necessary for high-performing bottle bills. These are things like clear and enforceable performance standards, that are used to make sure that you're measuring program performance, in statute fail-safes that are going to fine-tune the program if anything is underperforming, transparent and clear oversight requirements to make sure that the stewardship organization is running the program in a way that works for residents and businesses, and mechanisms to fairly compensate Maryland businesses like retailers and restaurants for their roles in the system. These are key provisions which are all included in the bill. Finally, it was brought up in the questioning, I know there's going to be a push for EPR for packaging in Maryland. We're extremely supportive of those programs. We've worked on most of the programs in the US. You can't use that as an excuse not to pass a bottle bill. Those are separate programs. You need a bottle bill to address litter. I'd encourage you to pass both. They're great programs. They work great in concert together, but you can't pass one and not the other. If it's not politically feasible, you should prioritize.
Great, thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. That's the end of the sponsor panel. Any more questions for the sponsor panel? Okay, we have other in-person favorable witnesses. Walter Tucker, Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network. Kelly Dorden, Trash Free Maryland. Maggie Ostall, National Aquarium. And Lehan Safis, Mayor of Cambridge.
Ask the people here in support to stand up.
Of course.
Okay, with those who are here in support, thank you very much for being here.
All right, great shirts. And for the new panel, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Lehan Safis. I'm the mayor of the city of Cambridge, and I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 232. The city of Cambridge also urges you to support House Bill 232. The Maryland Beverage Container Recycling Refund and Litter Reduction Program also has as the Maryland Bottle Bill. We support House Bill 232 for the purpose of reducing beverage container litter and plastic pollution, providing cleaner parks, waterways, and creating savings for municipalities and local taxpayers. The city of Cambridge, as well as other municipalities, could save thousands, in some municipalities, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars with the passing of this bottle bill. What we take to the dump comes with a financial cost, and the less we take to the landfill, we actually pay less in tipping fees. And I also personally support this bill because I know firsthand the effects of poverty and pollution. My cousin, growing up, he didn't have the best life, and I remember multiple summers, he and I would collect cans just so he could provide for himself financially. This would be a revenue-generating opportunity for those with limited incomes. Passing this bill will financially empower nonprofits, creating jobs, and create entrepreneurship opportunities for the less fortunate. We urge a favorable recommendation for this bill. I yield the remaining of my time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. I'm Kelly Dorden, Executive Director of Trash Free Maryland, here in support of HB 232. Trash Free Maryland works towards a state free of trash and litter. We advocate for policies based on significant contributors to trash and litter that we identify through cleanup data from our neighborhoods and waterways throughout Maryland. You have our written testimony in front of you with sign-ons from 13 state and local environmental and watershed protection groups. You've heard already the many reasons people support a deposit return system for bottles and cans. Public polling indicates Marylanders support this and other action to reduce plastic pollution in our environment. So I'll be brief. Deposit return systems for beverage containers have unique benefits over some other systems, and they have advantages for increasing collection of high-quality materials and demonstrably reducing litter when you compare states with deposit return systems for beverage containers to states without. We support this modern deposit return system or bottle bill, which can go hand in hand and complement systemic policies to address other types of plastic and other types of packaging. But we don't want Marylanders to be left behind on the benefits of a bottle bill in the meantime. We respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you all very much for your time today. I know it's been a long day. Thank you to Delegate Terrassa and all the bill sponsors for working tirelessly to establish a bottle deposit program in Maryland. My name is Maggie Ostall. I'm the Senior Conservation Policy Manager at National Aquarium, where we focus on combating climate change, stopping plastic pollution, and saving wildlife and habitats. And have a nice aquarium. We hope you all visit again and again. Reducing beverage container litter relates to all of our conservation goals. About half the beverage containers that end up as litter in Maryland are plastic.
Most plastic is made from petroleum. Every stage of the plastic use cycle contributes to greenhouse gas pollution that drives climate change and environmental justice concerns. Plastic in the environment breaks down into smaller pieces that, as you've heard, harm human health, and they are eaten by and harm wildlife. To meet the scale of the problem, we need public policy change that builds on the individual and organizational efforts of many. For the National Aquarium's part, we have committed to comprehensive solutions, and so far, on our campuses, we have replaced all single-use plastic from our cafes, including plastic beverage containers, with better alternatives. We have installed several water bottle filling stations for guests and staff that in 2024 alone avoided use of at least 130,000 plastic water bottles. We are one of many nonprofit organizations in Maryland that regularly lead cleanups alongside countless dedicated volunteers. During just the past 4 years of these cleanups, we have removed more than 35,000 plastic water bottles, single-use water bottles from the Chesapeake Bay and its habitats. In addition to thousands of volunteer hours, the state spends millions of dollars to clean up litter. Marylanders' time, capacity, and taxpayer dollars could be better allocated from picking up beverage container litter, especially when this legislation offers an effective and proven solution. And this bottle bill would complement other measures that you're considering this session, such as the minimum recycled content standards, other extended producer responsibility programs, and additional policies. We urge a favorable report on this bill, and thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce, members of the committee. My name is Chip Tucker. I'm a deacon in the Episcopal Church. I serve at a parish in Calvert County and another parish in southern Anne Arundel County. I'm a member of the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network, and I represent the Diocese of Maryland. Our faith teaches us all creation is interconnected, and the health of our environment directly impacts the well-being of our communities. Our standard of living has led to a degradation of our sacred earth, and we have a moral responsibility to work for restoration of the environment. Episcopal Church endorses responsible stewardship of God's creation. You've heard the statistics about the plastic pollution problem. Just suffice to say, plastic pollution is a major problem for Maryland and worldwide. Beverage container deposit programs are a proven, highly effective policy for recovering used containers and keeping them out of the environment. 10 states have successful beverage container deposit programs, and yes, would it be great if Maryland became the 11th state? The bottle bill is a step in the right direction by incentivizing recycling of single-use containers and reducing litter and plastic pollution. All creation is a gift from God that we need to nurture, and this bill promotes environmental stewardship and care for our environment, our local waterways, and even the Chesapeake Bay. It aligns with our faith's teaching on the importance of caring for God's creation and ensuring that future generations can enjoy a healthy and sustainable environment. And the Diocese of Maryland requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this panel? Okay, we have some additional virtual witnesses. Melissa Swythuth, Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and Committee. I want to be quick because, sorry, I look a little frozen here. I'm going to be quick because really I'm just going to reiterate what others have said, but Neighbors in Northwest Branch 100% endorses this and wanted to just call out our written testimony. We focus on the health of the Northwest Branch and do a lot of cleanups in Montgomery County and Prince George's County. And in Montgomery County alone last year, in our cleanups with Montgomery Parks, we cleared about 5 tons of trash. Overwhelming majority of trash that we find is beer containers and plastic bottles. There are a lot of unauthorized beer parties along the stream bank, unfortunately, and folks just leave their beer bottles there, and a lot of soccer games where people just toss their bottles right on the ground, and even at the playgrounds. So we are very much in support of this to get those products and to give people an incentive to take their beverage containers back to the store and instead of dumping them along the riverbank. So thank you very much for hearing our testimony and hearing the panel, and that's it.
Thank you so much. We'll turn to Trey Sherrard, Anacostia Riverkeeper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for this opportunity to speak to y'all. It's nice to be here again.
I was hoping I could get up to Annapolis, but I wasn't able to get out of DC this time around. While I'm in DC, I'm Trey Sherrod. I'm the riverkeeper here at Anacostia Riverkeeper. A lot of people think about most of the Anacostia River running through DC, but that's only the blue line on the map. Most of the watershed of the Anacostia, all the land that drains all its rain, and unfortunately all of its trash into the Anacostia, 5/6 of that area is Maryland. Half of our watershed is Prince George's County. A third of it is Montgomery County. Over half of the litter that we pick up with volunteer cleanups and out of the trash traps that we manage in Prince George's County and out of the trash trap that we installed in Montgomery County is some kind of beverage container, whether it be glass, plastic, or aluminum. Plastic is an enormous problem, the plastic bottles in particular, for all of the health reasons, all of the chemical reasons that have already been stated before me. But I did want to reiterate that half of the litter we are pulling out of the environment is a beverage container. For the past couple years, while we've heard previous iterations of this bill, I have noted that this should be a political opportunity. And so it was incredibly disappointing to see really strong committee hearings in recent years and then no further action. I hope that this committee will report favorable to this bill. This bill is an enormous leg up for reducing litter in communities and then in our environment as well. I did want to use the end of my time to reiterate some points I think kind of came off quiet earlier, namely that the actual recycling doesn't happen for bottles right now in Maryland. Because of contamination by the oil can and other things that we heard on the previous bill, bottles in single stream recycling can't become bottles again. With this kind of bill that's proposed here, they can.
Great, thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate having you. Susan Collins, Container Recycling Institute. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, that took more clicks of a button than it should have, but it worked out. Thank you very much. My name is Susan Collins, and I'm the president of the Container Recycling Institute. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that is focused on promoting policies that maximize the recycling of packaging materials. Our organization has been researching and analyzing these programs and their outcomes for more than 30 years. As others have said, this bill would have Maryland join 10 other states in having a beverage container recycling refund program, but this bill has been designed to be more effective and modern than those other programs that were established decades ago. This bill would result in the tripling of recycling for beverage containers in the state of Maryland. And I want to address one of the questions, at least from the delegates. I want to say unequivocally that we already know from more than 50 years of program experience and countless studies how successful these beverage container programs are and the typical outcomes. We also know that curbside recycling alone is incapable of achieving the same results. People have talked about low collection rates and contamination, and that's all quantifiable, and we've quantified it. Those programs, curbside recycling, max out at about 45% recycling rate, and they don't address the litter problem. Currently in Maryland, in some cases, glass that is recycled by consumers is not actually recycled due to issues with sorting and cross-contamination of materials. This bill, the Recycling Refund Bill, would create a program that will generate clean, high-quality glass that is desired by glass manufacturers so that it can actually be made into glass bottles again. The most successful jurisdictions, to address another delegate question, have all three of these program types. They have beverage container deposit laws, plus EPR for packaging laws, plus recycled content laws. And there are dozens of jurisdictions around the world that have both EPR for packaging and beverage container deposit laws operating side by side. These programs have existed since 1970, so they are more than 50 years old. They now exist in nearly 60 jurisdictions from the US to Canada, Australia, Europe, South America, and beyond, and they will serve more than 800 million people worldwide by 2027. The last thing I want to touch on is jobs. We support this bill.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Jobs are important.
Yes.
We seeing no questions, we will turn to favorable amendment virtual testimony. Allison Kustick, Association of Plastic Recyclers.
Hello again, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. As you said, I'm Allison Kustick with the Association of Plastic Recyclers, or APR, and I'm here in a favorable with amendments position on House Bill 232. I represent businesses across the U.S. that recycle plastic bottles every single day, including the plastic bottles collected through Maryland recycling programs. Our businesses wash, grind, and process bottles into recycled flakes and pellets, and then that recycled plastic is used to make new bottles, carpet, polyester clothing, and other products. APR businesses turn waste into a valuable feedstock to supply U.S. manufacturing, and more than 93% of plastics collected in the U.S. are recycled in North America. But plastics recycling overall lags, and I'm here representing businesses that want and can recycle more plastic. And I'm here because we need your help. APR members have the built capacity, so that's the existing conveyor belt, sorting equipment, and more, to nearly double plastic bottle recycling rates across the U.S. And companies have committed to using more recycled plastic. In fact, there's expected to be 3 times more demand for recycled PET bottles than we currently collect today. But here's the catch. Businesses can't recycle what doesn't get collected. So I'm here to ask for your help to increase recycling rates and reduce litter so those discarded bottles can be turned back into bottles by U.S. businesses, promoting a more circular economy. The best pathway to increase recycling and reduce plastic pollution will be to amend House Bill 232 and Senate Bill 901, the EPR for packaging bill, together. So we urge you to align these bills to improve recycling for all plastics, support stronger U.S. manufacturing, reduce reliance on virgin plastic, and reduce litter in Maryland. EPR for packaging and bottle deposit systems must be viewed as this end, not either or policies. We encourage the legislature to move this bill forward and amend it to incorporate EPR for packaging. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. I see no questions. We will turn to our unfavorable witnesses. There's more of you than there are chairs, so we'll just ask you to rotate through. We'll start with Sarah Price, Maryland Retailers Alliance, Bruce Barriano on behalf of the Licensed Beverage Distributors of Maryland and the Candy Guys, Bob Douglas, Licensed Beverage Distributors, Chaz Miller, Maryland Recycling Network, and Drew Vetter, NWRA. And please just go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable committee members. Sarah Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance to share serious concerns about the impact that this policy would have on food retailers due to the high costs and burdens that container deposit programs can impose on the business community. It is true that technology has come a long way from businesses needing to establish a full-service counter and storage facility to accept bottles. Drop centers and reverse vending machines sound like a wonderful alternative as long as a business has room for them and if they are consistently and reliably in working order. But the bill does require businesses to be able to manually redeem and process these containers if the RVMs are out of commission for any reason. Feedback that I have received from our multi-state members has indicated that RVM operators do not always provide prompt service to empty machines or address mechanical issues or contamination from foreign materials. So businesses basically need to be ready to accept bottles inside at any time. Additionally, these alternative redemption services are not free contracts. Participating businesses would receive a handling fee, and we appreciate that, but that comes out of the fund that we have already paid into in order to be able to operate in the state in the first place. I also have questions about the balance of remitting unredeemed deposits back to the program if a business has had to pay the producer to get the bottles in the first place and then does not get those redeemed back. Additionally, I would note that every other deposit state allows food retailers to sell alcohol products. So at this time, we would be put in the position of having to accept and redeem products that we cannot sell. This proposal, like every other stewardship program that requires buy-in from businesses, has a major impact on the business's operating costs and on the upfront prices for customers. So for those reasons, we would urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Drew Vetter, representing the Maryland chapter of the National Waste and Recycling Association, here in opposition to this bill. Our members include haulers, landfill operators, recycling facilities, all committed to increasing recycling rates in Maryland. We recognize litter is a problem, but this bill would disrupt our existing curbside recycling system and create a separate and duplicative program for beverage containers. Rather than diverting funds to a bottle bill, Maryland should invest in improving curbside collection. We have a member, WM, who is about to open a $50 million state-of-the-art recycling center in Elkridge in Howard County. This facility will include optimal sorting systems to increase and capture the rates of all recyclables, including PET plastics and other types of beverage containers. Once fully operational, it will process 210,000 tons of material annually, serving multiple counties and cities. This facility represents the future of efficient recycling. A bottle bill will pull valuable materials out of our current recycling system, increasing costs for local governments and ultimately residents. It also relies on a large behavioral shift, asking consumers to store and transport bottles instead of using their bins. Bottle bills came about before modern sorting technology existed. So today, enhancing existing curbside recycling is a better path forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our members of the Maryland Recycling Network are very heavily involved in the collection and processing of recyclables. We agree that litter is a serious problem. The beverage containers are a highly visible form of litter, and the container deposits can reduce litter. However, as written, this bill will impose unintentional collateral damage on Maryland's 7 material recovery facilities, also known as MRFs. These facilities process Maryland's curbside recyclables. They will be faced with a loss of revenue and higher operating costs, which will be passed along to their customers who operate Maryland's curbside recycling programs. Deposit containers are maybe 5% of what a MRF processes, 5%. Yet, considering that aluminum cans are valued currently at $1,800 a ton, and PET bottles are currently $360 a ton, whereas the average value of a ton of recyclables coming out of a MRF is around $85 to $90 a ton right now. This is an enormous contribution. This is about a third of the revenue that we're talking about here for these facilities. While this bill attempts to offset lost revenues and a higher cost to local governments, the formula is cumbersome, and it doesn't really do anything for the 3 privately owned MRFs, which includes a new facility opening in Howard County. California recognized this problem because California was the first state to pass a deposit law when MRFs were viable operating entities. The first 8 states passed their laws before there were real MRF infrastructure in this country. California saw there was a problem to resolve. California wrote their legislation so that the MRFs and deposits could work together, which I think is the goal we want to achieve here. So in light of these concerns, we'd like to work with the sponsor and find out a way to make sure that the MRFs can work with deposits. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bruce Bariano, here on behalf of the Licensed Beverage Distributors of Maryland in opposition to this legislation. I'm not going to repeat what was indicated by the other opposition speakers. I just want to bring up 2 things which have not really been emphasized. Number one, the legislature 2 years ago passed a bill, the Senate and the House, creating an assessment and producing responsibility packaging statewide assessment needs. I don't know why it's taken 2 years and nothing has been done, but legislation was passed to really study this issue in a full, broad, proper way, and nothing has been done about that. I would urge the legislature to tell this group that was created by the legislature, please complete your job and your tasks that you've been directed to do as quickly as possible so that you could have the benefit of proper and unpressurized analysis of what's the best thing to do. Secondly, this whole program would really impede dramatically the very successful programs that are going on at the county and the city level. I know in Anne Arundel County where I live, it's a very good program, and that impact needs to be looked at. And lastly, I would say, look at the fiscal note, please. We cannot afford any additional expenditures by state government. It's going to be close to $250,000 next year. And if you look at the fiscal note, the state effect, it's going to go up very substantially, and it'll go up to about $5.6 million. We can't afford the programs we have now, according to the budget presented and the problems before you all. So please look at that very carefully and realize the realities, and let's emphasize and support the local governments in their recycling programs. Thank you.
Great. And you're covering Mr. Douglas as well?
Excuse me?
You're also covering Mr. Douglas also with the licensed beverage?
Yes, I
Great.
am. He was unable to be here. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Delegate Stein?
Question for Chaz, just to follow up your point about California. So you say California's bottle bill did figure out a way to protect private sector MRFs in addition to the public ones?
Yeah, what they did is they worked out a
successfully?
container processing fee. It's not a perfect solution. It's had to be, they amended it, I think, 2 years ago. But they drew up the law with that in mind, that let's make sure everybody works together, let's make sure both programs work, and let's do both.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, brief moment in history for the committee. It's been 45 years since this bill was first introduced in the Maryland General Assembly in 1980. So, that's probably, I mean, if we just...
I was there.
You were there? Okay.
I was, oh yeah. I was even there before the bill went in.
Really? Okay. I've been reading articles about it. It was quite the fight back then. Like, they had, like, marches across the bay. You probably remember, like, in support of this. And it was also, like, much, I think there were just, like, a lot more advocates on both sides. So we think today's hearing is long, but those were, like, all-day affairs, apparently. But anyway, a lot of time has been put into this idea over the last few decades. And I'm going to attempt in just a few seconds to just solve the problem entirely. I've been taking down notes of every single objection that you guys have. I've also laid out all of the objections that I could find in all the written testimony. I've spent the last hour going through all the differences in all the different states that have done this. And I think what's cool about maybe being potentially 11 is like the states do it in all sorts of different ways. So I feel like we could kind of take from all of them. So here's my proposal. You guys tell me if you guys still support, if you still oppose the bill. Okay, so the businesses need room for them. If the machines are broken, we don't require the businesses to take them if the machines are broken. 2, we worry about all the money going back to the program for the unredeemed deposits. We do like Michigan and some other states did, and let's split it like 80-20 or 75-25 between the state and the businesses. 3, we can't redeem products we can't sell. Okay, fine, you don't have to redeem beer. 4, in terms of the California fix, I don't really totally understand it, but this thing about the MRFs and the container processing fee, we do that. And then finally, Mr. Bariano, to your point, we delay the effective date until after recycling needs assessment. And we also reconfigure the way this works a little bit with MDE to lower the fiscal note, because I know that in other states this has cost taxpayers $0. So we work on that to reduce the fiscal note because of your point, very valid one about the structural deficit. We do all those things. I think that addresses literally every single argument I could find against this that you stated today or in any of the written testimony. And none of the things I stated are at odds with at least one or more of the existing programs that exist in the country. So if we did that, all that, it'll take some time. We got some time before crossover. Raise your hand if you're still opposed to the bill. All right. I tried, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I do want to follow up one of those. Ms. Price, I mean, you mentioned this interesting issue about accepting returns on products you can't sell. In Connecticut, you can buy beer and wine in grocery stores, but not liquor. And so how does that work in Connecticut? If I bring back, well, if Delegate Morgan brings back his empty liquor bottle to the grocery store, do they have to accept it in Connecticut? Do you know how that works?
I don't know at this time. I know some of the states have had different requirements as far as what bottles are taken back in the first place. I can look it up and I can ask members, but I can't answer that off.
Presumably that they were able to figure it out. I mean, Connecticut's had this program for a long time, and obviously they're recycling these types of bottles, despite what you said in your testimony.
I would posit that it is likely that there are far more beer and wine cans and bottles being returned than liquor bottles, so the volume
Okay,
is
but your
likely
concern
different.
was accepting something that they don't sell.
Yes.
So you're saying that no liquor bottles are returned in the state of Connecticut?
I'm saying it's a different volume, so it has a different impact financially.
Okay, Mr. Vetter, Maine has a really successful curbside recycling program, but they also have a very successful bottle bill program. So is it possible there's a way for these two things to coexist? Is it possible?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Our concern really comes down to something that Mr. Miller said, which is the beverage containers, the bottles, the plastic, the tonnage that you can sell those for really underwrites the expense of operating the recycling facilities that we have, the private ones and the public ones. You pull that revenue out of the system, you make those facilities much more expensive to run, which is a problem operationally for those that operate them, and leaves them in a situation where they need to make up that revenue from other places, which is going to be from their customers, which are other governments. I mentioned the WM facility. Yeah, it's one of the privately owned MRFs, but their customers are Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Frederick County, Carroll County, Baltimore City, City of Annapolis. So they're serving public entities. So you pull that money out of the system, those costs have to be made up somewhere. I don't know how Maine addresses that problem. It's not addressed in this bill. We're obviously, happy to talk about, as with the thing that underlies lots of these bills is how they affect the pressure on the waste disposal system. And we're interested in talking about that issue overall. But, we have that concern under this bill.
Okay, so you're saying it's not possible for them to coexist?
I don't believe so. We believe that the path forward is
so you
continuing
believe
to invest in
curbside recycling, which I think exists probably in all 10 of the states that have the bottle bill, and the bottle bill cannot coexist. That is your view. That is the view of your organization?
We don't feel that this issue about the revenue that comes out of the system has been resolved in any of those 10 states, so we continue to have that concern.
Okay. Delegate Healy?
Further, go down this path a little bit further, because I wanted to ask you, if I could, the MRFs, these organizations, and we've toured them. This committee has been on several tours, and we've seen how they operate. They sort everything out, and then so they sort these bottles out. If they can turn them in and get the deposit back from everybody who threw them away because they just didn't want to be bothered taking them back to the store, that's a source of revenue for you all, wouldn't it be?
Who gives you the money?
I mean, it seems like, if it's 10 cents a bottle or whatever it is, there'd still be a large volume going in, and you should be able to get it back, get the money out.
You can work the system together. Excuse me, you can work the system together. That's why I didn't raise my hand. You pull that rabbit out of a hat, and I'll be happy to tickle it. Maine, their bill is in the mid-70s. They were able to start their curbside well before MRFs were up and running. They could get them to work together. Our only concern is a system now in a state where we do not have a deposit, making sure they can continue to work together. And
so answer my question, please.
It can be done.
I mean, so you're already processing all these bottles.
Yeah,
one way or another.
Montgomery
Either you
County.
turn them in to be recycled, or you turn them in to get the cash back, right?
Yeah, but in Montgomery County, we're processing through our dual stream system. And to answer the question raised about plastic recycling, we sell all the plastic we collect in Montgomery County. You can't say all, there's always some you can't, so there's contamination. But it goes to end markets. Plastic recycling is real. Okay. The end markets are real.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that it seems like there's a financial way out of this.
But I think California is attempted to do that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to go one more. So if the MRFs, private or public, collected those bottles, got the money back because they would be collecting the bottles, and then put the money back into their facility, could they then coexist? Right, so if it works that if you find a bottle, pick it up, get your money, if that's the way it works, and the MRFs are out and they can pick up, right, could they not deposit, get the money and put it back into the facility?
It's a great question, and the problem, a MRF will get all kinds of recyclables in one bin, and then they sort them all out at the MRF, as those of you who visited Montgomery County saw. And you can't just pick out the deposit containers out of all that stuff going down the line at the MRF. That's the problem. That's why California figured out a way to what was covered that were deposit bottles, and that they could make the system work there.
So your point is that because you have to physically pick through it, you could not
precisely
adequately or efficiently pick out.
At someday there may be the sorting equipment that can zap on a product code, say that's a deposit container, bingo.
Sure.
Don't have that technology
So
yet.
if I can go a step further, if those facilities had a place where they could drop them off, like if you were a site, if they were a site and they could distribute the money and then somehow get money back and do it, could it potentially work?
Yeah, but
like what I'm somewhat hearing is that maybe there's an issue of competition. Maybe there's an issue of, I mean, you said it only works if the two can coexist. The coexisting is about who gets the money. This goes down to the money. Who gets the money? And so if efficiency is your problem, it seems like you would find a way to be efficient, because then you can collect those bottles. You could then be paying yourself to then have more MRF, like more.
That's true, but MRFs don't collect the bottles. They get the bottles that.
I understand, but what I'm saying is you could potentially be a site and collect and be the person that
MRF
collects.
could, but it's. I mean, for me to get to Shady Grove, that's.
But I
20
mean,
minutes
okay, let's say
plus.
you were a site, and Mr. Chair, I'm going to drop it after this. If you are the site and you can be the folks collecting and giving the money, it's a wash for you. But you'd have more, to your point, materials for that end market.
I think theoretically, yes.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you all at the subcommittee work session. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 232. Thanks everyone for a very hardworking afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day. Have a great weekend.